Chapter 26, The 9 Magic Knight Captains. The exam begins. The magic tree descends. Sek wore a slightly awkward expression. He raised a hand to his mouth and gave a light cough. That goes without saying. As he spoke, the glint in his eyes sharpened with excitement. He looked up toward the 9 captains seated high above, each occupying a grand chair. That man in the blue cloak and silver hair, that's Nozel Silva, captain of the Silver Eagles. The one in the red cloak is Fugolian Vermilion, captain of the Crimson Lion Kings. Just like the name implies, he uses fire creation magic. That beautiful lady in light armor is Charlotte Roselay, captain of the Blue Rose Knights. Truly stunning, isn't she? Sek's voice grew animated, his eyes shining as he spoke, but he quickly snapped back to himself and continued his introductions. The one in the purple cloak is Geldra Poiset, captain of the Purple Orcus. His tone noticeably flattened when he mentioned this name. Asta blinked. That's it. I've got no interest in slobs like him, Sek muttered under his breath, shrugging. Yuki's gaze, however, sharpened. Geldra Poiset, captain of the Purple Orcus. The magic that man wielded was precisely the one Yuki was most curious about, permeation magic. Unfortunately, given his current ability, it was impossible for him to get close, much less replicate such a technique. But later there would be an opportunity. If he could seize it, he might not only copy Geldra's magic, he could even devour his grimoire and fully master it. Still, that captain's reputation isn't exactly spotless, Yuki thought. No wonder Sek's tone went flat when he brought him up. That one there, Sek went on, is Dorothy Unsworth, captain of the Coral Peacocks, another beautiful lady. Wait, she's sleeping? Asta blurted out. They say she spends the entire day asleep, Sek replied with a shrug. Dorothy hailed from the Witch's Forest. She wielded an incredibly rare form of dream magic, capable of pulling people and objects into a dream world of her own making. It was somewhat like spatial magic, but entirely different in nature. Yuki recalled the information he knew about her. In terms of sheer power, she ranks among the strongest even within the 9 captains. That's Jack the Ripper, captain of the Green Praying Mantises. His severing magic is said to be able to split the very earth in two. And of course, that one's your old acquaintance, the captain of the Black Bulls, the god of destruction himself, Yami Sukahiro. The last one there is Rill Boys Mortier, captain of the Aqua Deer. He's only 19 years old, the youngest of all 9 Magic Knight captains. Asta's eyes went wide. 19? Even Yuno, usually calm and composed, showed a flicker of surprise. A 19-year-old captain was certainly extraordinary. Yuki remembered, Rill's magic was painting magic, which could bring his drawings to life, creating spells with any elemental attribute he could imagine. 19, huh? Only 4 years older than me. Asta said, his expression bright with determination. Guess the path to becoming Wizard King isn't as far off as I thought. Oh? Wizard King, is it? That's quite the dream, Sek said, smirking with a trace of mockery before his face turned serious again. The next Wizard King, though, that position already has a strong contender. Almost as soon as those words left his mouth, one of the captains stood up, and the entire stadium erupted into thunderous cheers. That's William Vengeance, captain of the Golden Dawn, the strongest Magic Knight squad of them all. He's deeply trusted by his subordinates, and during the last war, they say he personally took the enemy commander's head. Sek's tone brimmed with admiration. As he spoke, both Yuno and Asta's expressions grew serious, each more intense than the last. Yuki nearly laughed. For those two who aspired to reach the peak, it was clear that William had already become the first great mountain they aimed to surpass. But Yuki's eyes lingered on William, who now stood at the front of the viewing platform, his face calm and dignified behind that golden half-mask. Outwardly, Yuki's expression was the same as everyone else's, excited and respectful. But inside, a deep wariness stirred. If the most dangerous and unpredictable person in the Clover Kingdom is the Wizard King himself, then second place undoubtedly belongs to this man, William Vengeance. Few could even imagine that this celebrated leader, so beloved by the masses, the one whose reputation nearly equaled that of the Wizard King, was actually 2 souls sharing one body. Within him resided the spirit of an elf. Much like Yuno, who also hosted an elven soul. But Yuno's was the spirit of a deceased infant, lacking self-awareness and entirely subservient to Yuno's will. William's case was different. The elf within him possessed full consciousness, and had long since seized dominance. On the surface, William was the captain of the Golden Dawn. But in the shadows he was also the true leader of the Clover Kingdom's most dangerous organization, the Eye of the Midnight Sun. "Candidates," came William's calm voice. "Sorry to have kept you waiting. This year's exam will be overseen by me." He stepped forward to the very edge of the platform, his golden half-mask glinting under the light. His gaze swept across the crowd below, tranquil and steady. His tone was soft, yet each word carried effortlessly through the entire arena, silencing the restless murmur in an instant. There was no need for idle talk. William reached for his grimoire and in an even, measured tone, spoke 4 simple words. "World Tree Magic, Magic Tree Descent." Before anyone could react, a radiant green light burst from his grimoire, and an overwhelming surge of mana roared upward into the sky. Boom! The clear blue heavens darkened in an instant, as if swallowed by a great shadow. Dense clouds formed overhead, swelling with magic so thick it made the air tremble. Then, at the heart of those clouds, a dazzling emerald glow ignited. A tiny sapling appeared, swelling and expanding in mere seconds, its roots spreading and plunging downward at terrifying speed. A shockwave of raw mana swept across the entire arena, forcing gasps and cries from the crowd. Yuuki clenched his fists unconsciously, his gaze locked on the breathtaking scene above. Even knowing from the anime how powerful the captains were, seeing it with his own eyes still sent a shiver through him. The gap, it's enormous. And this was only William's casual display of magic. Crack, rustle. The colossal roots continued to extend downward, until, just before they touched the heads of the gathered examinees, they split into countless thinner tendrils. Each delicate root extended precisely to the front of every single candidate. Such incredible mana, such perfect control. Yuuki swallowed hard as one of the roots stopped before him. If William wished it, he could wipe out every examinee present in an instant. Even the strongest among them wouldn't stand a chance. Chapter 27, Mage Ranks, Flying on Broomsticks. The roots that stretched before each examinee didn't stop changing. In just the span of a single breath, the tips of those roots solidified, transforming into broomsticks one after another. Yuuki drew in a quiet breath, then raised his hand to take the broom in front of him. From the stands above, William smiled faintly. Seeing that every examinee now held a broom, his calm, measured voice resonated through the arena. "Then let us begin. The Magic Knight's entrance examination officially starts now." The crowd below remained utterly silent. Clearly, everyone was still stunned by what they had just witnessed. Most were in awe of William's overwhelming power. But for Yuuki and a few others, it wasn't just his strength that shocked them. It was the fact that he had so casually created so many flying broomsticks at once. Since they were called flying broomsticks, that naturally meant they could be used to fly. Yuuki looked down at the plain broom in his hand, which seemed no different from an ordinary one used for sweeping floors. Yet, a glint of excitement flickered deep in his eyes. This was a treasure. Just like in the world of Harry Potter, these brooms were essential magical tools for mages who lacked natural flight spells. For most low-ranking mages, a flying broom was a luxury far beyond reach. At least, Yuuki couldn't afford one himself. And yet William had casually made hundreds of them in a matter of seconds. If Yuuki remembered correctly, there were originally 512 examinees, 513 including himself. In other words, William had just crafted 513 flying brooms in a few short breaths. To say Yuuki wasn't tempted would be a lie. If he had that kind of skill, he could get rich overnight. Of course, he guessed the brooms were probably one-use creations. But that didn't change the fact that William could easily make genuine, permanent flying brooms if he wished. After all, he wielded World Tree Magic. But then again, a top-ranking noble like William wouldn't care about something as trivial as money. Thinking of the spell he had just used, World Tree Descent, Yuuki subtly shook his head. No matter how much he wanted to replicate it, he knew better than to try. Even if he managed to copy it, using it would instantly drain every drop of his mana. Speaking of mana, mages were actually divided by rank, but the systems differed from kingdom to kingdom. In the Clover Kingdom, ranks were roughly measured by merit stars. In the Spade Kingdom, they used the 8 Shining Generals system. Meanwhile, the Heart Kingdom and Diamond Kingdom used a much clearer measure known as mana stages. Under the mana stage system, strength was divided into 10 tiers, with stage 0 being the strongest and stage 9 the weakest. To even stand a chance against a devil, a mage needed at least stage 1 power, that is, the level of a Magic Knight squad captain. Yuki glanced up toward the 9 captains seated above. Judging by their auras, aside from William, most of them were likely around stage 1. William himself was probably at the peak of stage 1, while the elf spirit inside him, Patry, possessed stage 0 power. Besides William, both Yami of the Black Bulls and Fugolian of the Crimson Lion Kings were also stage 1 peak-level mages. However, beyond stage 0 existed 2 special tiers, the Underworld stage and the Sacred stage. The Underworld stage referred to mages whose magic could affect devils themselves. The Sacred stage, on the other hand, could only be reached by wielders of elf magic. By Yuki's estimation, his current strength was around stage 7, perhaps bordering on stage 6 if he pushed himself. Ordinary Magic Knight members averaged around stage 5. But that didn't mean Yuki couldn't defeat them. If his chain magic, magic-binding iron lock formation managed to ensnare an opponent, the fight would be over before it began. A mage's battle was ultimately one of mana and magic. Whoever held the advantage there usually decided the outcome. Of course, that depended on actually landing the spell. If the enemy avoided the chains early, the difficulty would increase drastically. That was why Yuki was so eager to obtain piercing magic. Combining it with chain magic would make his bindings undetectable, allowing him to secure victory before the opponent even realized it. On the stands, William's calm voice once again drifted through the air. The examination will consist of several rounds. We 9 captains will observe and each choose candidates we find worthy. Those chosen will immediately qualify for squad membership. If more than one captain selects you, you may decide which squad to join yourself. Those who are not chosen will lose their chance to enter the Magic Knights. A wave of tension rippled through the crowd. For now, William continued, his tone turning slightly firmer, I want you all to ride the broomsticks before you. Any mage capable of controlling their mana properly will find this task quite easy. Flying is the most basic form of magical movement. If you can't even manage this, that would be rather disgraceful. His smile returned, gentle but commanding. Now then, the first test begins. The moment those words left his mouth, the arena erupted into motion. Many participants, clearly unfamiliar with broom flight, grew visibly anxious. Only a few from wealthy or noble families remained composed. Within seconds, dozens of examinees began attempting takeoff. Yuki focused his mana, channeling it into the broom. It accepted his mana smoothly with no resistance. The broom immediately began to hover. A knowing light flickered in Yuki's eyes. Not difficult at all, he murmured, stepping lightly onto it. He continued channeling mana, feeling out its flow and control. After a few trials, he'd already figured it out. More mana meant higher altitude. Less mana lowered the broom. Concentrating mana toward the broom's tail controlled its speed. In short, the test was one of mana control, a field Yuki excelled at. Even those with prior broom experience would gain little advantage here. After all, the captain's eyes were sharp enough to see through everything. Hovering in midair, Yuki looked around. Over half the examinees were now flying with varying degrees of control. The rest were struggling, some wobbling just above the ground, some falling off outright, others clinging on upside down in panic. And of course, one person stood out above them all. Asta, still firmly planted on the ground. Chapter 28, The Final Magic Duel, Bronze Magic. Even several of the 9 squad captains couldn't help showing expressions of surprise as they looked toward Asta, who still remained grounded. What's going on? No matter how poor someone's aptitude is, at least floating a little on a broom should be possible for anyone. Fugolian Vermilion, captain of the Crimson Lion Kings, rubbed his chin in mild astonishment as he spoke. High above, Yuki glanced down at Asta, amusement flickering in his heart, but he wasn't particularly worried. These early tests didn't really matter, even if Asta scored poorly. All that truly mattered was earning Captain Yami of the Black Bulls recognition in the end. With that thought, Yuki refocused on his broom. At a mere flicker of will, the broom began to rise, moving nimbly through the air. Before long, he spotted Yuno soaring highest above the arena, both feet planted firmly atop his broom as he flew. He was the only participant flying like that, standing upright on his broom. The flashy display naturally drew countless eyes to him. Yuno noticed Yuki's ascent as well. A faint smile curved his usually calm face, and his pale golden eyes flicked toward Yuki in silent challenge. I may not have your amount of mana, he said, but when it comes to mana control I'm not going to lose. Yuki smiled lightly. So wanted to turn this into a contest? Since Yuki already knew the nature of the test, he had trained specifically for it, and controlling mana precisely happened to be his greatest strength. Gripping the broom handle near its head, Yuki tensed his waist and gracefully rose to stand upon the broomstick. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Just like Yuki now stood balanced atop his broom as he flew. Flying this way was far more difficult than normal. Not only did it require superb balance, but the mana flow that normally came from one's hands had to be redirected through the feet, drastically increasing the precision needed to maintain control. A single mistake could send one plummeting from the sky. Wow, that's amazing. From the stands, Rill, captain of the Aqua Deer, leaned forward with sparkling eyes, unable to contain his excitement as he watched Yuki and flying atop their brooms. Oh ho ho. Looks like we've got a few promising ones. Jack the Ripper, captain of the green praying mantises, propped his chin in his hand, his narrow eyes half-lidded, like a predator eyeing fresh prey. The broom flying test soon ended. Just as Yuki had expected, their enchanted brooms dissolved into motes of green light shortly after the test concluded. Next came the mana measurement test. Then, the mana control test. The creation magic test. The evolution magic test. One after another, the exams proceeded in an orderly fashion. Other than scoring poorly in the mana measurement test, since his unique attribute made it difficult to cause destructive effects with raw mana, Yuki ranked within the top 5 in nearly every other event. Before anyone realized it, the exam had reached its final stage. The participants were weary from both exertion and mana use, yet excitement burned brightly in every face. Next, William's calm voice rang out, will be the final test conducted in the form of live combat. The instant his words fell, Fugolian leapt to his feet, eyes blazing with passion as he shouted toward the examinees below. Then fight? Split into pairs and face each other one-on-one. Use your grimoires to defeat your opponent. For us, battle is our work. Show us your true power without holding anything back. His fervent voice reverberated through the vast arena. Everyone's expressions turned solemn. They all knew that this final round of duels was the true heart of the entrance exam. After declaring the rules, William and Fugolian retook their seats in the stands. Down below, the participants stood momentarily stunned before realizing they were to find their own opponents. The arena quickly erupted into motion once more. Yet no one dared approach Yuki or Yuno. After the earlier tests, everyone understood how powerful the two were. Yuno calmly swept his gaze around, then walked over to Yuki. How about we face each other? He asked softly. Yuki shoved his hands into his pockets and shook his head. I'll pass. You're way too much trouble as an opponent. Relax, Yuno replied with a slight smile. Someone's bound to challenge us anyway. Think about it, one of us wields a 4-leaf grimoire and the other scored near the top in almost everything so far. We're both commoners. Don't you think that'll rub plenty of nobles the wrong way? Yuki withdrew one hand from his pocket and gestured first at Yuno, then at himself, chuckling. Yuno blinked, then laughed quietly in agreement. As the two conversed, Sek had already stepped forward, choosing none other than Asta, the worst performer so far, as his opponent. Yuki turned his gaze toward the upcoming match between Asta and Sek. Now this would be entertaining. Sek clearly thought picking Asta was the easy way to secure victory. Unfortunately for him, Sek couldn't have chosen a worse opponent. Asta's real strength couldn't be measured by the earlier tests, and Sek's bronze magic leaned heavily toward defense. Against Asta's anti-magic, that made him the perfect target. Amusement gleamed in Yuki's eyes. He couldn't decide whether Sek was simply unlucky, or whether Asta was the fortunate one. This place isn't for filthy little rats like you, Sek sneered, pressing a hand on Asta's shoulder before leaning in with a mock smile. Thanks for tagging along as background filler till now. You can crawl back to your pathetic little village and enjoy the rest of your trash life. By this point in the exam, Sek felt he'd sized up the competition well enough, and saw no reason to keep pretending. Asta stared at him blankly for a moment. Sek, unwilling to waste more words, stepped a few paces away and raised his grimoire, shouting, Bronze creation magic, bronze defensive sphere. A glowing bronze barrier enveloped Sek, forming a solid orb of metal. Around its surface protruded several cannon-like structures, both protective and capable of counterattack. It was a spell built for both offense and defense. Chapter 29. Do you know why the Magic Knight squads recruit every year? A bronze-colored sphere of defensive magic? Yuuki examined the spell before him and gave a subtle nod. No wonder this guy managed to join the green praying mantises. Regardless of what kind of person Sek was, just judging by his magic alone, it was indeed quite impressive. It balanced both offense and defense, and its durability looked solid as well. If Yuuki wanted to break through that magic sphere, he'd have to use the wind magic spell he'd replicated from Yuno. The match is already decided. With that kid's mana level, there's no way he's breaking that barrier. Damn it, that guy got to fight him first. I wanted to go against that runt too. He's just a peasant from some backwater village. Like someone like him could ever join the Magic Knights. Mocking voices echoed around the arena. Hardly anyone believed Asta could win. Perhaps the only ones who did were Yuuki and Yuno. Surrounded by a storm of sneers and contempt, Asta's expression remained calm and unshaken. He'd already been through enough disappointment. He'd finally gotten his grimoire. Finally caught up to Yuuki and Yuno's footsteps. There was no way he'd stop here. In that case, I'm coming. Asta took a deep breath and fixed his steady gaze on the arrogant opponent standing inside the bronze magic sphere. Sek waved casually. Go ahead, don't hold back. He wore a smug grin, seeing Asta only as a stepping stone. But the moment the word back left his mouth, Asta vanished. In an instant he reappeared before Sek. Before Sek could even react, the black greatsword came crashing down. The bronze sphere shattered instantly, like paper crushed under steel. Huh? Sek's eyes went wide. Boom! With a dull crash, he was slammed into the ground and knocked unconscious before he even realized what had happened. The arena fell into dead silence. Countless stunned gazes turned toward Asta, who stood there calmly, holding his rusted greatsword. Yuuki smiled faintly. No matter how shocked everyone was, the exam went on. All sorts of magic filled the arena as the duels continued, dazzling even Yuuki. Especially among the nobles, their spells tended to be stronger, their power clearly boosted by their naturally vast mana reserves. Watching this, Yuuki couldn't help but understand. No wonder the nobles and royals looked down on commoners. Born with overflowing mana, they naturally came to believe they were superior. Come to think of it. Yuki's eyes flicked briefly to the stands, where a man wearing a half-face golden helmet sat, William, the captain of the Golden Dawn. It was said that the reason royals and nobles of the Clover Kingdom were born with such immense mana was because their ancestors stole it from the elves. Soon it was Yuno's turn. Just as Yuuki had predicted, a noble challenger approached him. Even though Yuno held a four-leaf clover grimoire, to some nobles he was still just a filthy commoner. They merely saw him as a stepping stone to show off their own strength. The match unfolded much like in the anime. The noble's powerful lightning magic was effortlessly blown away by Yuno's superior spellwork. Yuuki knew well at this age in a pure mana duel no one could overpower Yuno. Only magic with special restraining properties like chain magic could pose a real threat to him. Time flowed on and the exam gradually entered its later stages. Finally, a brown-haired young man wearing an ornate outfit approached Yuuki. My name is Mayasa Kubar. Would you be my opponent? Yuuki gave a calm nod. Sure. They walked side by side toward the arena. As they went, Mayasa spoke in an even tone, eyes still fixed ahead. To be honest, I'm surprised. I heard you, Yuno, and that odd one, Asta, all come from the same village. Besides him, both you and Yuno are rare talents. A single remote village producing two geniuses, that's quite unusual. He chuckled softly. So, what are you trying to say? Yuuki asked flatly, eyes still on the arena ahead. This world never lacks geniuses, Mayasa said. So what if you join a Magic Knight squad? Do you even know how many geniuses join every year? He smiled faintly, his eyes glinting with disdain. Do you know why the Magic Knight squads recruit new members every year? By now they had both reached the center of the arena. They stopped and faced each other directly. Mayasa's face carried a bright smile, but his gaze dripped with contempt. Yuuki stayed silent. Not that Mayasa expected an answer anyway. It's because those so-called commoner geniuses are already dead, he sneered. You're only fit to be our dogs. Even if you make it into the Magic Knights, we can just assign all the deadly missions to you. Leaning forward, Mayasa grinned wildly, his words laced with malice. Genius? What a joke. 4-leaf clover grimoire? So what? Yuki's expression remained as calm as ever, no anger, no resentment. He simply didn't care. That calmness threw Mayasa off balance. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Before he could think further, Yuki took a few steps back, widening the distance between them. Can we start? He asked, turning slightly toward the referee. Begin the match, the judge called. TCH whatever. Mayasa shrugged, lifting his wrist as his grimoire floated before him. Fire magic blahs. Clang. Whoosh. 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 Chains shot out from thin air around him, wrapping around his body before he could even finish his chant. The flames he just conjured fizzled out instantly. My mana, what happened to my mana? Mayasa struggled in panic, realizing his vast mana had completely vanished, locked away, unreachable. Across from him stood Yuki, holding his silver grimoire in one hand, his expression utterly serene. Chain magic, binding iron lock formation, he intoned quietly. Chapter 30, Astonishment. Duel magic? The entrance exam concludes. An uproar swept through the crowd. Everyone stared, stunned at Mayasa, frozen in place, bound tight by chains with no room to move. Moments ago, Mayasa had radiated confidence and power, most had expected a fierce match. But the noble hadn't even lasted a single round? While the examinees below gawked in disbelief, the 9 Magic Knight captains seated in the stands all froze in collective surprise. In particular, Purple Orca Captain Geldra suddenly sat upright, his voice tinged with shock. Chain magic? Silver Eagle's Captain Nozzle narrowed his eyes and turned toward him. If I remember right, one of your former squad members used that kind of magic, didn't he? That's right. Geldra nodded heavily, still looking incredulous. Similar magic, perhaps? Asked Aquadeer Captain Rill, clearly intrigued. No, exactly the same magic. Geldra shook his head firmly. As the former captain of Revchi, the chain magic user, there was no mistaking it. TCH, the exact same magic? That's impossible unless it's a hereditary spell, said Jack the Ripper, his narrow eyes gleaming with interest. But if I recall, Revchi was just a commoner. Even then, said Yami, arms resting on the chair, a cigarette between his lips, family inheritance wouldn't make 2 spells identical. Down in the arena, the battle continued. Damn it! Mayasa struggled furiously, but his mana was sealed. He couldn't break free. A mere commoner. A filthy peasant. If he had lost after a long, hard fight, he could have accepted it. After all, he knew from the earlier trials that Yuki was a rare talent. But to lose instantly, to be utterly crushed without resistance, was unbearable. He was a noble. You bastard. You filthy rat. You'll pay for th. His face twisted from pride to madness, raging like a cornered beast. Yuki wasn't interested in hearing any more of his shouting. Wind magic, Tower of Tempest. Boom! A roaring gale condensed before Yuki, forming into a swirling tornado that howled into existence, visible to everyone in the arena. At his silent command, the tornado surged forward. This can't be war-a-ah. Mayasa's horrified scream was swallowed by the storm as he was swept off his feet and hurled into the air, vanishing inside the vortex. Match over. The referee's voice broke the shock, shouting hastily before the attack went too far. Yuki snapped his fingers. The chains dissolved and the tornado vanished. Mayasa collapsed to the ground, eyes rolled back, unconscious. His once elegant clothes were shredded to tatters, making him look like a beggar. Even though the attack had lasted mere seconds before being stopped, his body was covered in bruises and cuts from the violent winds. Yuki's eyes flickered faintly. Yuno's wind magic really was powerful. If the referee hadn't intervened, Mayasa would likely have been torn to pieces within moments. After all, bound by chain magic, unable to move or use mana, Mayasa was no better than a normal human. The entire arena fell silent. Every gaze, astonished, awestruck, locked on Yuki. Even the captains on the viewing platform showed visible surprise. Did I just see that right? Duel magic? That's right. He just used wind magic. Is it really possible for a mage to wield 2 different kinds of magic? Never heard of such a thing. Murmurs rippled through the stands after a moment of stunned quiet. But the captains weren't fooled. After a brief pause, they exchanged knowing looks. "It's not duel magic," Jack the Ripper said first. "That wind magic he used, it's identical to the spell used by that kid with the four-leaf clover grimoire earlier." "So he's not casting two types of magic," said another captain thoughtfully. "He's copying other spells, replicating them perfectly." "Fascinating," murmured Charlotte, captain of the Blue Rose Knights. Her sapphire eyes sparkled with curiosity. "But what does he need as a medium to reproduce another's magic?" Yuuki probably didn't realize it himself, but in just a few moments, several captains had already analyzed his ability with frightening precision. Yet no one noticed the subtle shift in expression from Golden Dawn Captain William. For the first time, the calm gaze behind his half-mask flickered with emotion. Even when the wielder of the four-leaf grimoire, had appeared, William hadn't reacted like this. As captain of the strongest Magic Knight squad, William had no doubts. If wasn't a fool, he would surely choose the Golden Dawn. That much was expected. But Yuki's magic, that was something entirely unforeseen. Or rather, the surprise came not from William himself, but from the elf patry within him. In the arena, Yuuki walked over to Asta and Yuno, who were watching proudly. "Yuuki, that was amazing," Asta shouted, his face glowing with excitement. Yuuki chuckled and threw an arm around Asta's shoulder. "Not bad, huh? Now all that's left is the final selection." The trials continued until dusk before finally coming to an end. A small mishap occurred. Since there were 513 participants, one person had to fight twice. It wasn't exactly fair, but fairness? In the Clover Kingdom, being granted a chance to take the Magic Knight's entrance exam at all was the greatest fairness most could ever hope for. The matches are over. All examinees, step forward when your number is called. The referee's voice echoed once more, tightening everyone's hearts. No one dared to move or speak. One by one, numbers were called, and each chosen candidate stepped forward, awaiting judgment from the 9 captains above. Because in the end, the right to join the Magic Knights rested solely in their hands. Or, more precisely, in the hands of the royals and nobles who ruled the kingdom.
Wait! Hold up. Stop for a sec. Look, if you've already made it this far into the video and you're still here, come on, subscribe, bro. All right, I see you rolling your eyes. I'm moving. I'll get out of the way now so you can get back to the good stuff. But seriously, stick around and finish listening. It's worth it.
Chapter 31, Candidate Number 166, Rejected by All. Among the 9 Magic Knight squads, only the Green Mantis and Black Bulls could truly be called commoner squads. The rest were practically monopolized by nobles. And most of the time, how much say did those 2 squads really have in the selection process anyway? The numbers were called one after another until it was Yuno's turn. Just as in the anime, all 9 captains raised their hands for him. In the end, Yuno chose to join the strongest squad of them all, the Golden Dawn. Next came Asta. At first, none of the captains lifted their hands. But when Asta shouted with all his heart that he would become the Wizard King, Black Bull's Captain Yami showed interest and recruited him on the spot. Asta, with his wild energy and unconventional style, fit perfectly among the misfits of the Black Bulls. Number 166. The voice of the judge rang out again. Yuuki drew a deep breath and stepped forward. Judging by his earlier performance, he felt fairly confident. Joining a Magic Knight squad shouldn't be a problem. Based on what he knew of the captains, at least 4 of them were likely interested in him. The Black Bulls, the Green Mantis, the Purple Orca, the Aqua Deer. As for the remaining squads, even if their captains were impressed, they wouldn't pick him. For instance, the Blue Rose only accepted women, the Silver Eagles had long since turned into a family-run squad, and the others each had their own restrictions. Only someone like Yuno, a bearer of a 4-leaf clover grimoire, could break those invisible rules. As Yuuki walked forward, he mentally reviewed everything he knew about those 4 squads. If he had to choose, he most wanted to join the Black Bulls. Not just because some of their members possessed magic he greatly admired, but because he was already deeply familiar with that squad. Still, wanting it didn't mean it would happen. The Black Bulls had already taken 2 recruits this year. One, of course, was Asta. The other was Noelle, sister to the Silver Eagle's Captain Nozel, and one of the heroines. Due to her poor control over her immense mana, Noelle was ostracized by her family and denied entry into the Silver Eagles. Instead, she was assigned to the Black Bulls. On the surface, it looked like her family had given up on her. In truth, Nozel had arranged it to protect her. A captain's sister and a royal at that. Even Yami couldn't refuse her. Noelle didn't even need to take the entrance exam to be accepted. It was clearly unfair to the other examinees present, but none dared complain. After all, she was royalty. So in reality, the Black Bulls had already filled both their slots for the year. Each Magic Knight squad in the Clover Kingdom had a fixed size, but few ever reached their limit. Each exam usually brought in only a handful of new members. And with 2 recruits already chosen, the chance of Yami taking a third was very slim. As Yuki approached the stage, the captains watched him with mixed expressions, most of them intrigued. Yuki's versatile use of magic during his matches had stood out even among the many applicants. As he expected, the captains who showed visible interest were Jack the Ripper of the Green Mantis, Geldra of the Purple Orca, Rill of the Aqua Deer, and Yami of the Black Bulls. Any mage capable of using diverse magic was a rare talent, difficult for enemies to predict and invaluable in battle for both offense and support. Yami leaned back in his chair, his intrigued expression tinged with regret. If not for the troublesome addition of that royal girl Noelle, he truly would have wanted to recruit Yuki into his squad. With their keen eyes, the captains could all see the nature of Yuki's magic, an ability to replicate others' spells. Given enough time, he could easily grow into a formidable mage. How interesting, what a fascinating magic. A calm voice suddenly broke the silence, drawing every captain's gaze. It was William Vangeance, captain of the Golden Dawn. That was surprising. William rarely spoke. Even when recruiting Yuno, the 4-leaf grimoire bearer, he had only raised his hand without a word. So when William spoke up now, the others assumed he was interested in Yuki, something almost unheard of. But his next words gave them pause. I recall this candidate did quite well in all tests, except the mana measurement, wasn't it? William's tone was light, almost conversational. Yet that single remark made several captains frown thoughtfully. The mana measurement was meant to gauge an examinee's magical attribute and output. They remembered that Yuki's result had been poor. His own mana had shown no external impact or destructive power whatsoever. I see. Fugolian, captain of the Crimson Lion Kings, stroked his chin thoughtfully. So he can only fight by copying others' spells. His own strength is limited then. The ceiling for that kind of magic might be lower than it looks. Some of the captains nodded in quiet agreement. Geldra of the Purple Orca and Jack of the Green Mantis both lost much of their earlier interest. Even so, Rill, captain of the Aqua Deer, said with bright curiosity, isn't that kind of magic still really? Humph. A cold snort cut him off. Commoners are commoners, said Nozel Silva, captain of the Silver Eagles, lifting his chin with an air of disdain. Nothing but parasites. Every spell a mage creates is the result of personal effort and intellect. For another to wield those spells freely, it's an insult to all who've poured their lives into studying magic. Noble magic is not something a lowborn should ever touch. His tone grew colder as he finished speaking. Rill opened his mouth to respond but fell silent. As the youngest of the 9 captains, his voice carried little weight among them. Yami frowned slightly at Nozel's words, not out of surprise but irritation. He knew these nobles and royals far too well. Their arrogance didn't bother him anymore. What did catch his attention, though, was William. Something about that man's tone felt off. But when Yami thought about it, William hadn't really said anything wrong, had he? At that moment, Yuki stepped up to the platform below the captain's seats. All captains who wish to recruit this candidate, please raise your hand, the examiner announced loudly. Yuki took a deep breath, steadying his racing heart, and looked up at the 9 captains. Seconds passed in silence. None raised a hand. Candidate number 166, no squad selection, the examiner declared. Chapter 32, How Arrogant. Silence. The entire arena suddenly fell eerily quiet. How could this happen? Asta couldn't help but take a step forward, muttering in disbelief. Even Yuno's usually calm face showed rare astonishment, his eyes filled with confusion. Yuki's scores throughout the exam had been among the top, and in the final duels he had achieved victory with overwhelming ease. With results like that, how could no captain choose him? Around them, the other examinees exchanged glances, their faces full of surprise. Everyone had expected Yuki to be selected, at least one or two captains should have raised their hands. Yet the result defied all expectations. However, no one seemed to truly care why Yuki hadn't been chosen. Instead, they looked on with thinly veiled glee. The fewer people accepted, the greater their own chances became. There were only so many slots in the Magic Nights after all. Down below the stage, Yuki stood frozen in place, as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over him in midsummer. A chill ran from his scalp to his toes. Shock, disbelief, indignation, his mind was a storm of tangled emotions. Just moments ago he had been thinking about which squad he'd join. And now? Not a single captain had chosen him. It was the cruelest kind of irony. He had thought it would be easy, effortless even, to enter a Magic Knight squad. But reality had proven far harsher than he imagined. The crushing sense of contrast twisted painfully in his chest. Even with his usually composed temperament, Yuki couldn't suppress the rising bitterness. Then suddenly he remembered Sister Lily's worried expression as she spoke to him before he left. "Yuki, your replication magic is a very special kind of magic. Everyone at the church shares their spells with you because they see you as family. But out there, recklessly copying others' magic might earn you hostility." Lifting his head, Yuki met the indifferent gazes of the 9 captains on the viewing platform. With their experience, it was impossible they didn't see the potential in his magic. If he joined a squad, just a bit of training could make him compatible with anyone. His replication ability was the ultimate support magic. He was a walking trump card. He didn't need to spend time researching new spells, could adapt instantly, and had limitless potential for growth. There was no way the captains didn't understand that. And yet, none of them chose him. He thought he'd understood Sister Lily's warning back then. Now he realized he hadn't understood at all. A wry smile tugged at Yuki's lips as he turned and began walking back toward the crowd. "How arrogant," he murmured. It wasn't clear whether he was mocking the captain's pride or his own naivete. From his seat, Yami glanced at Yuki's retreating figure, a faint expression of regret flickering across his face. At the center of the captain's stand, William Vengeance watched through his golden mask. His eyes glimmered faintly, unreadable, perhaps amused, perhaps entirely emotionless. As Yuki approached, Yuno and Asta both rushed to meet him. "Yuki, are you all right?" Yuno asked, worry clouding his usually calm tone. "You're so strong, Yuki. How could none of them pick you?" Asta shouted, his frustration bubbling over as if he had been the one rejected. Seeing the concern on both their faces, Yuki smiled faintly. He reached out and clapped each of them on the shoulder. "Relax. I'm fine. Whether we're chosen or not isn't something we can control. Besides, you two were both accepted. That's something to be proud of. Everyone at the church will be happy for you." He smiled as he spoke. "Yuki." Asta opened his mouth to comfort him, but couldn't find the right words. "I'm really fine," Yuki said, chuckling softly. "I told you before, I was never interested in becoming Wizard King. Sure, it stings a little to be turned down, but it's not the end of the world." Yuno took a deep breath. "Yuki, I'll become Wizard King for sure. And I'm not gonna lose to you, you know," Asta declared immediately. Yuki grinned. "Then I'll be watching to see which of you makes it first." The 3 of them exchanged glances, then burst into laughter together. The announcer's voice continued to echo across the arena, calling out more names. One by one, candidates stepped forward, most returned empty-handed. Only a handful were chosen by the 9 captains. By the time evening approached, the Magic Knights entrance exams were finally over. Outside the arena, Yuno and Asta stood on either side of Yuki, both still looking unusually downcast. Strangely enough, they seemed more affected than he was. "What's with those faces?" Yuki teased. "Come on, you two are Magic Knights now. Don't let Hage Village down." He punched each of them lightly on the arm. Compared to the disappointment he'd felt moments ago, Yuki's mood had completely recovered. His frustration had only come from the contrast, seeing Asta and Yuno both accepted while he wasn't. But now that he'd cooled off, he realized there was no reason to dwell on it. After all, he'd never wanted to join a squad to chase the title of Wizard King. His goal had always been to grow stronger, to protect himself, and to use his knowledge of the story to plan ahead. So what if he hadn't joined a squad? It didn't mean losing his advantage. It only meant his path would be more complicated, and perhaps a bit more dangerous. Most importantly, his magic wasn't just replication. It could also devour other grimoires. If he joined a Magic Knight squad, he'd constantly be surrounded by skilled mages and powerful captains. Any strange change in his grimoire could easily be discovered, especially by that man, the Wizard King himself. And the last thing Yuuki wanted was to attract his attention. Devouring grimoires to gain power, no matter how one framed it, that wasn't a secret that could be revealed to anyone. Thinking about it, not joining a Magic Knight squad might actually be safer. Yuuki, what will you do next? Yuno asked after a moment's silence. My next move? Yuuki blinked, momentarily at a loss. His original plans would all need to be redrawn. After a short pause, he scratched his head and smiled. I guess I'll stay in the capital for now. There are a lot of opportunities here, and going back to the village with my tail between my legs would be a bit embarrassing. Really? That's great. Asta's eyes lit up. Then we'll get to see each other all the time. Chapter 33, Spatial Magic. A unique power system. When Yuuki said he planned to stay in the royal capital, both Yuno and Asta's faces lit up with excitement. Even if you didn't join a Magic Knight squad, I know you'd never give up on getting stronger. Just don't let me leave you in the dust, Yuuki, Yuno said with a sincere smile. After 5 years together, Yuno knew better than anyone that Yuuki was a genius. Techniques like magic reinforcement and compressed mana bursts to enhance speed were things Yuno couldn't even imagine doing. He was confident that even if Yuuki didn't become a Magic Knight, his strength would never stagnate. If Yuuki were the type to give up just because of a setback, then he wouldn't be the Yuuki Yuno knew. Being overconfident isn't always a good thing, Yuuki replied softly with a calm smile. And don't forget about me. Asta suddenly spoke up. Oh right, here Yuuki. Take this. As he spoke, he hurriedly pulled a small pouch from his pocket and pressed it into Yuki's hands. It was the travel money Father Orsi had given the three of them before they left the village, though Asta had been the one carrying it the whole way. In the eyes of Father Orsi and Sister Lily, Asta was basically just going on a trip. They didn't think he'd be chosen as a Magic Knight, so they had simply entrusted all the money to him. It wasn't much, but since they'd barely spent any on their journey, Asta was now giving Yuuki everything that remained. Yuno and I are about to join our squads, so we probably won't need to spend much, Yuno added, worried that Yuuki might refuse. But you'll be staying in the capital, you'll definitely need it. Yuuki hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, I won't be polite about it. As Yuno said, he truly would be needing it soon. Making me wait, huh, brat? You've got some nerve. A rough, cold voice cut through the air from behind them. See, Captain. Asta stammered, his body tensing as he turned to see Yami walking toward them. Yuuki turned as well and saw the Black Bull's captain, Yami Sukahiro, flanked by two members, Finral and Gordon. Yami didn't seem interested in explanations. He grabbed Asta by the collar and hauled him upright with one hand, then lazily turned his head. Finral. Let's go. Got it, Captain. Finral smiled elegantly and opened his grimoire. With a graceful wave of his hand. Whoosh! A shimmering circular portal about a meter wide appeared in the air. The space within it gleamed with silver-gray snowflake-like patterns. Only Finral himself could control the destination of his portals. No outsider could tell where they led. Yuki's gaze sharpened slightly. Seeing such a spell stirred a deep longing within him. That was spatial magic. No matter what world one was in, it was always among the most powerful forms of magic, one that manipulated the very laws of existence, and one of the hardest to master. And yet, in this world, there were people born with such rule-defying powers. It was hard not to be in awe. Still, perhaps because this world made such powers too accessible, the mages of Black Clover's world only ever displayed fragments of what those forces could truly do. Take this spatial magic before him, for instance. Finral's magic wasn't particularly offensive in nature. Its essence was spatial transfer, the ability to teleport people or objects to any place the caster had been before. Of course, during teleportation, if the spell was interrupted mid-cast, the spatial rift could also be used to cut through objects, though that was merely a byproduct of the spell's true nature. Just like within the Black Bulls. Magna Swing's fire magic was classified as explosion magic in essence. Fire naturally carried a burning effect, but the core of his spell lay in detonation. Finral belonged to the noble Vaude family, a lineage renowned for their innate mastery of spatial magic. His younger brother, Langris Vaude, the vice-captain of Golden Dawn, the very squad Yuno would soon join, was also a user of spatial magic. If Finral's spatial magic was the support-type variant of the art, Langris, on the other hand, was the purely offensive type of spatial magic user. The essence of his spells lay in spatial severing, magic that sliced through space itself. Once unleashed, it was utterly terrifying. That was the true uniqueness of this world's power system. What is that? Asta's panicked voice rang out as he stared wide-eyed at the swirling portal in midair. If you can't use mana to fly, I could have taught you a simple movement spell, oh right. Yami sighed lazily, still holding Asta up by one hand. You don't have any mana. Without another word, he casually tossed Asta straight into the portal. Asta's screams were abruptly cut off the moment he vanished. Yuki silently watched the scene unfold. Just when he thought Yami and the others would follow through the portal, Yami turned around leisurely and looked directly at him. With your results, I thought you'd be sulking or bitter about not being chosen, Yami said, studying Yuki with mild curiosity. But you seem oddly calm. Captain Yami. Yuki was surprised that the man had bothered to address him at all, but he still bowed slightly out of respect. After all, Yami Sukahiro was one of the 9 captains of the Magic Knights, someone whose status, strength, and authority were far beyond the reach of a commoner like him. What's the matter? Got nothing to say? Yami's voice remained relaxed, almost indifferent. Yuki hesitated, uncertain why the captain had suddenly chosen to speak with him. Could it be that Yami intended to recruit him? No, unlikely. With Yami's personality, if he'd wanted Yuki in his squad, he would have said so on the spot, not lingered like this. No, Captain. Yuki shook his head quietly. Ha! You're a lot more composed than I expected. Yami let out a low laugh, then his gaze sharpened ever so slightly. Well, that's good. Better calm than reckless. Still, since you're friends with my new recruit, I'll give you a bit of advice. His tone turned serious. Don't mess around with noble magic. That's just asking for trouble. See, Captain, Finral interrupted nervously, his arm trembling as sweat beaded on his forehead. Maintaining a portal this large is kind of exhausting. So if we could maybe hurry up. Who do you think you're ordering around? Yami spun on his heel, eyes narrowing. Hold it together and surpass your limits right here. Finral's expression twisted into pure misery. His face was pale and his breathing ragged, clearly his mana was running dry. Seeing that, Yami gave an unconcerned wave and stepped into the portal. Finral and Gordon followed right after, vanishing into the shimmering silver gateway. You should head out too, you know, Yuki said lightly, gesturing toward the group of Golden Dawn members waiting not far away. They hadn't approached, nor did they intend to. Even though Yuno had been officially accepted into Golden Dawn, his lowborn origins still made him an outsider in their eyes. The only reason they were even waiting for him at all was because of Captain Williams' direct orders. Then I'll be going, Yuki. Yuno looked like he wanted to say more, but he swallowed his words, gave Yuki a firm nod and turned to leave. He knew Yuki didn't need comforting. Among the 3 of them, Yuki had always been the calmest, the most composed. Until next time, Yuki. Chapter 34, Take fate into your own hands, don't disgrace the Transmigrator's name. At the Black Bull headquarters, Yami and his squad stepped out of the spatial portal and were greeted by a rather pitiful sight. Asta sat kneeling on the ground, frozen stiff, staring up in utter shock. Before him stood an enormous castle. It looked a bit old and weathered, yet to Asta it was still an awe-inspiring sight. What a clueless kid, Yami muttered, clicking his tongue at Asta's reaction. Finral waved his hand to close the portal behind them, letting out a long breath of relief. Captain, you seemed pretty interested in that boy, Yuki. Why didn't you take him in too? His magic looked rather promising. TCH. Yami plucked the cigarette from his lips and started striding toward the castle, giving no intention of answering. Seeing that, Finral could only shrug helplessly. He turned to Asta, who was still staring blankly ahead, and patted him on the shoulder. Come on. I'll take you to meet the rest of the squad. Oh, okay. Asta replied, still dazed. Meanwhile, outside the Colosseum, Yuki watched the figures of Asta and Yuno vanish completely. The relaxed look he'd worn moments ago slowly faded, replaced by quiet composure. What an unexpected day, he murmured to himself, recalling Yami's earlier words. That wasn't just a warning, it was also a kindness in its own way. Yami had probably spoken for Asta's sake. Still, to others, Yuki's magic appeared to strengthen only through replicating the magic of others. In this kingdom, the most powerful spells naturally belonged to the magic knights and the nobility. Give up on growing stronger just to avoid offending nobles? Perhaps Yami's advice was kindly meant, but it stood squarely in the way of Yuki's pursuit of strength. Invite trouble, huh? Yuki muttered softly, lowering his gaze to the silver grimoire in his hand. His eyes gleamed with newfound resolve. Whether it was during the Magic Knight entrance exam, where one could only wait to be chosen, or in Yami's so-called kind warning, all of it reminded him of one bitter truth. He had no right to choose, only the fate of being chosen. A faint chuckle escaped his lips. Heh, I'd rather take fate into my own hands. He tightened his grip on the silver grimoire. Instead of worrying about grand plans for the future, I should first find somewhere to stay. Otherwise, I'll be sleeping on the streets tonight. Looking up at the darkening sky, Yuki stepped off along the wide street leading toward the lower city. There's about 300 yen left in my purse. He calculated grimly. That might be plenty in Hage Village, but here in the capital it won't last me more than a few days. In the Clover Kingdom, the currency was called yull, coins about the size of a small medallion though thicker. Each one was forged from a varying mix of copper, silver, and gold. The higher the denomination, the greater the share of precious metal. Yuki's purse held 30 10 coins in total. Tucking the pouch close to his chest, he exhaled slowly. This is my lifeline for now. Whatever schemes or ambitions I have, that's for later. For now. He started walking again, a faint smile playing on his lips. First, I just need to survive. First things first, he needed somewhere to sleep and something to eat. What a disgrace to transmigrators everywhere, Yuki sighed, scanning the street around him. The closer one got to the capital's center, the higher the prices naturally climbed. So he decided to head toward the outer edge of the lower town, hoping to find somewhere cheap and modest to stay the night. It was nearing dusk. The streets had lost the daytime bustle, though there were still people wandering about, browsing shops or haggling with vendors. After 5 years in Hage Village, this was the first time Yuki had seen such a sight. It was like stepping into an entirely different world. By all logic, with the level of extraordinary power this world possessed, reaching at least a basic level of comfort shouldn't have been so hard. Plant-based mages, for instance, could easily conjure vast quantities of food just by channeling their mana into plants. But none of those powerful mages would ever do such a thing, because feeding the masses wasn't something exalted mages like them were meant to concern themselves with. Growing crops, producing food, those tasks naturally fell to the commoners and the powerless. Royalty, nobility, commoners, and peasants, each class was so deeply entrenched that they might as well have been living in entirely separate worlds. Yuki remembered when the priest and Sister Lily had held a farewell feast for him, Asta and Yuki, before they left the village. It was a sweet potato banquet, and some of those sweet potatoes had even been borrowed from neighbors. The poverty of Hage Village stood in stark, painful contrast to the capital's abundance. The difference was like heaven and earth. Still, Yuki didn't harbor any desire to overthrow the nobility or spark some revolution. Anyone who did was either a fool or hopelessly self-righteous. In a world where individuals could wield power strong enough to rival entire nations, change wasn't something that could be achieved through mere ideals. Even in his past life, where people preached equality, true fairness had never been realized, how much less so in a world where the gap between individuals was a literal chasm of power. Yuki had always considered himself a selfish person. So, things like saving the world were better left to those saintly heroes who loved to shoulder the weight of humanity. He only wanted to protect those close to him and make sure they could live a better life. Returning to his senses, Yuki scanned the streets again, searching for a cheap inn. The taverns with shining magic lamps at their doors and ornate signs? He didn't even bother to glance at them. Then suddenly, his steps halted for a moment before resuming, though his brows drew together ever so slightly. The farther he walked from the capital's center, the fewer pedestrians there were on the street. Finally, Yuki came to a complete stop. "Come out." His voice was low, tinged with frost as he turned around. When the street had been crowded earlier, he couldn't be sure, but now that the people had thinned out, the faint sense of being followed was undeniable. Whoever it was clearly wasn't very skilled at tailing someone. In fact, they didn't even seem to care about being discreet. Two men emerged from opposite sides of the street, grimoire in hand and smirks on their faces. Two? No, more. Yuki's gaze flicked backward. Two more mages stepped out from behind, blocking the road in both directions. He was surrounded. The few pedestrians still lingering nearby instantly realized what was happening and scattered in panic, eager to avoid getting caught up in whatever was about to unfold. Chapter 35. What are you doing? Meeting Rebecca Scarlet. Four men, each clutching a grimoire, advanced slowly. Their cold, mocking eyes fixed on Yuki, who stood encircled at the center. I don't think I know any of you, Yuki said in a low, steady voice. Hey, you don't. But you've offended someone you shouldn't have. One of the mages sneered, his expression cruel as he sized up Yuki's limbs. Brothers, one arm or leg each. Take all four off. A vicious command echoed through the street. The other three mages laughed coldly, gazing at Yuki like butchers eyeing a lamb for slaughter. Take off his limbs? They were out for blood. Yuki's gaze turned frigid, though his mind remained calm. He could already guess who had sent these men, but now wasn't the time to dwell on that. 4 against 1. The odds weren't in his favor. He was surrounded, breaking through would be impossible. That left only one option, fight head-on. His eyes swept over their positions. Magic binding iron lock formation could seal just one of them, but whoever was caught would instantly lose their ability to fight. That would still leave 3 opponents. He'd have to use Tower of Storms to block off the 2 behind him, leaving only one mage he'd have to face directly. Of course, that was the ideal scenario. In reality, he couldn't unleash 2 spells back-to-back in an instant. And his enemies wouldn't stand around waiting politely while he did. That gap between incantations was the most dangerous moment of all. The silver grimoire before Yuki floated into the air, glowing faintly. Around him, the 4 mages' grimoires rose as well, each one radiating its own menacing light. They sneered at his defiance, their contempt palpable. The air grew tense. And then, bang! From across the street, the door of an old, dimly lit little diner flew open. Out stepped a girl in an apron, her reddish-brown hair spilling past her shoulders. What do you think you're doing? Her voice rang sharp through the night as she stood there, hands on hips. The sudden shout froze everyone in place. The leader's face darkened, the passers-by had already scattered. And yet this girl had the nerve to walk toward the commotion. Stay out of this, the mage snapped coldly. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a bunch of kids to sleep? The red-haired girl shot back irritably, an odd remark, but her tone brimmed with genuine annoyance. I don't care what you're trying to do, she continued, raising her voice. But today's the Magic Knight's recruitment day. Each district has members stationed nearby. If you 4 don't leave right now, I'll call the Magic Knight officer over here. And he's really close by. Her deliberate shouting carried down the street. The 4 mages' faces twisted in unison. They weren't actually afraid of the so-called Magic Knight station nearby. After all, if they dared attack someone openly, they clearly knew that help wouldn't arrive in time. Yuki knew it too. He'd only been in the capital for a day. And the only person he'd offended was that noble Meath. For someone of his rank, delaying the city guard, or even a Magic Knight, was child's play. Even so, the girl's shout had drawn attention. People began peeking from shop windows. Curious faces multiplying along both sides of the street. The crowd might not intervene, but they certainly weren't shy about watching. Seeing that, the 4 mages' expressions soured even further. Withdraw, the leader barked. Without hesitation, they vanished into the night. Yuki stayed where he was, eyes following their retreating figures. His face remained tense, no relief, only grim resolve. He knew full well that a noble like MIA's wouldn't let him go so easily. Troublesome, he muttered under his breath, a chill glint flashing in his eyes. Pulling his silver grimoire from the air, he let it settle into his hand. And turned toward the red-haired girl. Whatever the reason, she had saved him. Because of the dim light earlier, he hadn't clearly seen her face. But now, as he approached, he froze for a heartbeat. Reddish-brown hair with soft curls. A petite nose marked by a few faint freckles. That familiar face. Rebecca Scarlet. The same red-haired girl he'd met upon entering the capital. The one caring for a group of children. And the very same Rebecca from the anime. who'd gone on a mixer with Asta, Finral, and Luck. Of all people, her? Yuuki blinked, then suppressed his surprise and stepped closer. Thanks for earlier. No need to thank me, Rebecca replied briskly. She looked tired, her cheeks slightly pale. But her voice carried an easy, straightforward warmth. When she saw his face more clearly, her eyes lit up. Wait, I remember you. You're the guy from this morning. You came for the Magic Knight's entrance exam, right? That's right, Yuuki smiled faintly. He hadn't expected her to remember him at all. You had 2 companions with you, Rebecca said, puzzled. Don't tell me you got separated? Not exactly. Yuuki shook his head. They've already been chosen by the Magic Knights. Wow, that's amazing. Rebecca's big brown eyes widened in astonishment. Then, realizing what she'd said, her expression softened apologetically. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that. 3 had taken the test. 2 were accepted. She could imagine how that must feel. And on top of that, he'd just been attacked moments ago. It's fine, Yuuki said simply, shaking his head. He truly didn't mind. Then, growling, a low rumble sounded from Yuki's stomach. Both of them froze. And a moment later, Rebecca burst out laughing, covering her mouth. Chapter 36, a 30-yell dinner and a small trick for sensing mana. Inside the tiny restaurant, Yuuki sat at a wooden table, staring at the food laid out before him, a forearm-thick loaf of bread, a small plate of cured meat slices, and a bowl of vegetable soup. The meal was simple, but for someone like Yuuki, who had lived in the impoverished Hage village, this was without a doubt the most luxurious meal he'd had since crossing over into this world. Thank you, Yuuki said, looking at Rebecca across the table, his expression slightly embarrassed. This is a restaurant. Serving food to customers is literally the point, and you still have to pay for it, Rebecca said, flicking a lock of her reddish-brown hair away from her forehead and staring at Yuuki seriously. Of course. Yuuki nodded immediately. Only then did Rebecca look relieved. From the boy's clothes alone, she could tell he wasn't exactly wealthy. If he couldn't pay, she'd take a loss, and the restaurant already had very few customers as it was. Yuuki didn't remain polite for long. He lowered his head, grabbed the long loaf of bread and dug in. The bread was a bit hard, but the cured meat was seasoned just right, and the vegetable soup had a uniquely fresh flavor, probably thanks to a type of mushroom he didn't recognize. To Yuuki it was a feast. In just 2 or 3 minutes he had completely cleared the table. His previously growling stomach finally went quiet. When Yuuki looked up again, he saw Rebecca staring straight at him without even blinking. What's wrong? He asked, puzzled as he wiped his mouth. He didn't think he had anything on his face. How was the food? Rebecca asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation as she watched him closely. It was great, Yuuki said with a satisfied nod. Rebecca lit up with joy, though it dimmed again almost immediately. Then why do so few people come here to eat? Maybe because the restaurant looks a bit old, Yuuki said gently, gesturing at the decor. From the storefront outside to the interior tables and chairs, everything felt worn with age. No amount of cleaning could erase that old, dated feeling. A place like this might keep a few loyal regulars, but it wouldn't attract new customers, especially not in a city like the royal capital, and certainly not wealthy ones. Rebecca froze, her expression dimming further. Feeding and caring for her younger siblings already cost her a fortune. Renovating the restaurant was far beyond her means. How much was the meal? Yuuki asked, not wanting to dwell on the topic. He already knew her situation from the anime. 30 Yule, Rebecca said softly as she quickly began clearing the plates. 30 Yule. Yuuki took out the payment from his pouch while thinking. For him, this meal felt extravagant, but from the state of Rebecca's restaurant, it probably wasn't expensive. It was just one meal. 300 Yule won't last him long. And with a noble like Meath secretly keeping an eye on him, surviving in the capital was proving far more difficult than he'd expected. By the way, do you offer lodging here? Yuuki asked, placing the coins on the table. He suddenly remembered he still hadn't found a place to stay. We do, but... Rebecca paused, her tone hesitant. Yuuki blinked in confusion, just about to ask more when... Wah! A sudden wail burst through the restaurant. Rebecca winced apologetically before rushing off. Yuuki understood immediately. Just as he was about to leave and find another place to stay, Rebecca's departure was like a signal. Several small red-haired children peeked out from behind the counter and instantly darted toward him. Rebecca's younger siblings. It took her quite a while to soothe her 1-year-old brother back to sleep. When she finally returned to the dining area, she froze. Yuuki hadn't left. Not only that, her younger siblings, who were supposed to be sleeping, were now all gathered around him, listening with full concentration to whatever he was saying. I'm so sorry. They must have bothered you. Rebecca hurried over, apologizing non-stop before scolding them sharply. What are you all doing? Go back to sleep now. Big sis, Snow White is so pitiful, one of the children protested. And there are still 7 dwarves left. Let us listen a little longer. Please, big sis, just a little more. One childish voice after another chimed in, their wide eyes all fixed pleadingly on Rebecca. No. Rebecca refused firmly, her tone righteous and unmoving. Since their sister wouldn't budge, the little ones immediately shifted their gazes toward Yuuki. The story's almost over anyway. Let them listen a bit longer, otherwise they'll be too excited to sleep. Yuuki smiled gently, his voice warm and soft. Seeing that Yuuki didn't seem bothered at all, and feeling her siblings' hopeful stares, Rebecca finally sighed and nodded in resignation. Yuuki picked up the story right where he left off. At first, Rebecca didn't pay much attention. It was just a bedtime story for kids after all. But as she listened, she unknowingly became absorbed too. When Snow White's tale finally reached its perfect ending, the children burst into excited cheers. Rebecca blinked back to her senses at the sound. Realizing she herself had been completely drawn in, a faint blush rose across her cheeks. She looked up at Yuuki on reflex, but seeing he hadn't noticed her embarrassment, she quietly exhaled in relief. All right, time for bed. Yuuki spoke to the children in that same gentle tone. Then, to Rebecca's astonishment, her siblings actually obeyed him. They lined up and headed back to their rooms without a fuss. She couldn't help but stare. Getting them to go to bed usually took a whole battle on its own. Are they? Yuuki asked. He already knew they were Rebecca's siblings, but since their parents never appeared in the anime, he was curious. They're my younger brothers and sisters. Our father and mother passed away one after another, they're all I have left. Rebecca's expression dimmed with quiet sadness. Yuuki murmured, I'm sorry. It's fine. Rebecca shook her head, then added with a touch of surprise, I didn't expect you to be so good with kids. I grew up in a church. We took care of a lot of younger children there, so I've picked up a few tricks. Yuuki chuckled softly. Oh, sorry. Rebecca hadn't expected Yuuki to be an orphan. Yuuki smiled. It's okay. Rebecca froze for a moment. Why did this exchange feel so familiar? Anyway, I'll take you to your room. Her cheeks flushed lightly as she hurried ahead to lead the way. Click. Yuuki closed the door behind him and glanced around the small guest room. Then he shut his eyes and walked slowly around the space. A few moments later, he opened them again. No mana disturbance. Looks fine. It was a small technique for sensing the flow of natural mana. The mana used by mages and the natural mana in the air were different. Wherever mage-generated mana existed, it would inevitably disturb the natural mana flowing through the surroundings. Yuuki could feel the natural mana's movement, which let him eliminate certain risks. But the technique was extremely limited, he could only sense about half a meter around himself. Meath, I need to deal with him as soon as possible. Yuuki sat on the bed. The gentle expression he wore earlier had vanished completely, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp calm. He also needed to earn money fast. He knew that before long a dungeon would appear. One filled with treasure, and most importantly one of the 3 swords he cared about most, the Demon Dweller sword. That was something he needed to plan for carefully. Chapter 37, Meath's Fury and Ferocity. Is my sister's face a little red? While Yuuki was still contemplating how to deal with the situation regarding Meath. Elsewhere, inside a lavishly decorated room, an elegant carpet made of exotic beast fur lay casually across the floor. Several fist-sized magic lamps hung along the walls, illuminating the entire room with bright, steady light. My lord. The 4 mages who had attempted to ambush Yuuki were now kneeling on the ground, terror written all over their faces as they looked at the young man sitting in the chair before them. Useless trash. You can't even handle something this small. And you were scared off by a woman. My money isn't something you can just take and run. Meath glared at the 4, his expression dark and venomous. A surge of scorching flame rose from his palm, instantly raising the temperature of the entire room by several degrees. The 4 mages paled as cold sweat poured down their foreheads. "My lord, please give us another chance. We guarantee we'll complete the task you assigned us." The eldest of the 4 hurriedly lowered himself flat against the ground, voice trembling. Their employer was a noble. Even without the payment involved, a noble's displeasure was something men like them could never afford to provoke. Meath's expression remained icy, his gaze toward them filled with nothing but disgust and contempt. When he came to the capital for the Magic Knight's entrance exam, he had been nearly certain he would make it into a squad. Because of that, he had only brought 1 butler with him, and no other subordinates. Otherwise, he never would have needed to hire gutter rats like these. "You get one last chance. Keep watch on him. Don't let that low-born vermin escape. Otherwise..." Meath withdrew the flames from his hand with a flick of his wrist, his voice flat. He never finished the sentence. But all 4 mages suddenly felt a terrifying presence lock onto them, making their bodies tremble. The eldest carefully lifted his head and glanced toward the well-dressed middle-aged butler standing behind Meath. The man seemed completely uninterested in everyone in the room, absorbed in meticulously polishing a wine glass in his hands. But the mage leader knew. That terrifying killing intent was coming from the butler. "Why, yes, my lord. We won't disappoint you." The leader gritted his teeth and spoke quickly. The 4 mages backed out of the room and fled as quickly as they could. Meath picked up the glass of wine on the table, a bottle that had already been properly aired. Under the glow of the magic lamps, the wine inside shimmered with a dazzling crimson hue. Not bad. He took a light sip and the tension on his face finally eased a little. "Master Meath," the butler said softly, "that commoner's companions have joined the Black Bulls and the Golden Dawn. If he dies, will that bring trouble upon the family?" Crash! The delicate wine glass shattered against the butler's face, splashing him from head to toe with the blood-colored liquid. Yet the sudden blow didn't make the butler's expression shift even slightly. He continued standing respectfully, unmoving. "Idiot. That's exactly why that filthy insect must die." Meath's features twisted with rage as he roared. "Tomorrow, strike when the opportunity is right. Those 4 worthless rats can't handle him. I want to watch that low-born beg on his knees before me." "As you command, young master," the butler replied calmly. The next morning, as dawn broke, the royal capital awakened once more with renewed energy. The bustling streets quickly filled with people. As the heart of the Clover Kingdom, the capital was naturally the liveliest place in the realm. Inside a small restaurant, Rebecca had slipped out early while her younger siblings were still asleep to buy ingredients needed for the day's meals. When she returned, carrying the groceries, she found her little brothers and sisters already awake and sitting around one of the tables. "You're all awake?" Rebecca saw her younger siblings sitting at the table. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled. Welcome back, sis. You worked hard." "Sis here, this money is for you." Voices overlapped one after another. "Huh? What's this money about?" Rebecca froze for a moment. Only then did she notice the small pile of coins on the table. "That big brother who stayed here last night left it." "Oh. And he also took some of the lamp oil from the shop. He said if the money wasn't enough, he'd pay the rest later." The oldest of the children quickly explained. "Lamp oil?" Rebecca blinked in confusion. She walked over and saw 100 yull laid out neatly on the table. The amount clearly covered the lodging fee from last night, plus what he took for the lamp oil. Lamp oil wasn't worth much anyway, even giving it to him for free wouldn't have mattered. Rebecca gathered the coins and put them away. Seeing her siblings chatting noisily beside the table, her mind couldn't help drifting to the scene of them last night, quietly crouched beside Yuuki, listening to his story. What a strange person. He's obviously younger than me, but he gives off such a mature feeling. He doesn't act like someone from a remote village at all. Thinking about how gentle Yuuki spoke, and how calm he remained even after what happened last night, she dazed out for a moment. "Sis? What's wrong?" a small voice asked beside her. "Nothing." Rebecca snapped back to herself, hurriedly lifted the groceries, and rushed into the kitchen. "Is Sis's face kinda red?" "I don't think so. Maybe she's hot." "Oh." On the bustling streets of the royal capital, Yuuki walked along with a small bundle strapped to his chest, his expression full of interest as he carefully examined the shops and stalls lining the street. From time to time he stopped to look closer. His wide-eyed curiosity made passers-by give him the same look they'd give a clueless country bumpkin. Yuuki didn't mind. There really were a lot of things here he was seeing for the first time. He strolled leisurely like a genuine tourist, probably the first proper one this city had seen. Meanwhile, about 20 meters behind him, the 4 mages were tailing him tightly. This brat's got nerves of steel. After what happened yesterday, he still has the mood to window shop. Damn it. There are too many people here, we can't make a move. 2 of the mages muttered under their breath. Both of you shut it, the eldest snapped. No matter what, he's still someone taking the Magic Knight's entrance exam. His strength definitely isn't low. Otherwise that noble wouldn't have hired us. Keep your eyes on him. If he slips away, you know what happens. Once there's an opening, we strike immediately. Chapter 38, Strolling Through the Capital with Enemies in Tow. Time passed little by little. Yuuki still wandered through the bustling streets, sometimes picking up his pace, sometimes slowing down. He would even linger for quite a while when something caught his interest. The royal capital was enormous. Not to mention the outskirts, those suburban towns were ridiculously large. No matter where he wandered, there was always something new to see. Unfortunately, everything was expensive. With only 170 Yul left in his pocket, he could afford little beyond food. Before he knew it, it was already noon. Yuuki was enjoying his stroll immensely. Meanwhile, the 4 mages tailing him were suffering terribly. This clueless bumpkin has been wandering all morning. What the hell is he trying to do? One of them finally growled under his breath. The other 3 showed equally frustrated expressions. A whole morning had passed, nearly exhausting their patience, and yet they still couldn't strike. Yuuki had been deliberately wandering the busiest streets, where any sudden attack would immediately draw the attention of the Magic Knights. That sense of frustration and impotence. It left the 4 mages simmering with anger. Earlier, they might have just wanted to kill him, but now they wanted to torment him first before ending him. Each of them was boiling inside. Keep watching him. I want to crush every bone in that brat's body. The eldest mage took a deep breath, gritting his teeth. Meanwhile, Yuuki remained leisurely. He crouched in front of a small street stall, inspecting a bizarre assortment of items. Broken half-blades, fragments of armor, and various other scraps, a chaotic collection of goods. The stall attracted more than just him. Several other curious customers were carefully inspecting the items. Of course, Yuuki was interested, but only to look. Despite their dilapidated state, none of these items were cheap. So they came after me too, huh? Yuuki muttered under his breath as he examined the items. He hadn't just been wandering aimlessly all morning. As he had suspected, the 4 mages who attacked him last night were trailing him again, silently keeping tabs. He deliberately stayed in the crowded streets to prevent them from attacking. 1 against 4, even with his powerful magic, he would be at a disadvantage. If he was outnumbered, he would at least use the terrain to his advantage. That was why he stopped and started repeatedly, observing the layout of the streets and surroundings. Truthfully, the 4 mages themselves weren't the real threat. The real problem was Meath, lurking in the shadows. Those 4 were merely pawns. Yuuki's concern was figuring out how to deal with Meath. If Meath remained hidden, there was little Yuuki could do. What surprised him was that, besides those 4, someone else was secretly tailing him. At first he was puzzled, but he quickly realized, the only person in the entire capital he had offended was Meath. The 2 groups must both be Meath's people. The situation wasn't hard to guess. The 4 mages failed to finish him off last night, leaving Meath uneasy, so he sent more subordinates. They really do take me seriously. A faint smirk appeared on Yuuki's lips. They weren't giving him a single chance, but instead of worrying, he relaxed. The less chance he had of turning the tables, the more likely Meath would eventually appear. A noble being humiliated, killed by a commoner during the entrance exam? That would be a deep insult to Meath's pride. There was no way he would let Yuuki escape that sight. Heh. I'm not worried if you show yourself. I just hope you aren't hiding. Yuuki smiled lightly and stood, merging back into the crowd. If Meath refused to show himself, Yuuki would have no choice but to rely on Yuno or Asta eventually. Meath wasn't foolish, he would understand this. That urgency to kill Yuuki came from pride and necessity. The grudge was already set. Yuuki continued his leisurely stroll through the streets, scouting terrain suitable for casting magic, all while leading his pursuers on a long chase. From morning into noon and then toward evening. Even taking breaks to recover his strength, he felt fatigue setting in. The same went for those tailing him. "I'll kill him. This commoner's been leading us in circles all day. He knows we're here." Anger and frustration erupted in their voices. Even the slowest to react realized something was wrong. Being toyed with by a lowly commoner all day? Anyone's temper would boil over. At this moment, even the eldest mage, normally calm, was consumed by a nameless fury, wanting nothing more than to tear Yuuki apart. "Even if we find him, the streets are getting emptier, he can't possibly." "Not good. He's running." One mage shouted in alarm. Yuuki, who had been strolling casually, suddenly sprinted forward. The four mages gave chase without hesitation. Their anger, building from morning till now, left no room for strategy, only the single thought of killing Yuuki. Yuuki ran with incredible agility, yet without using magic to boost his speed. He still had a tough fight ahead, and every bit of magic saved mattered. Fortunately, years of training in Haji village had given him a solid physique and endurance, enough to keep up with the chase, even if not as impressive as Asta. After a day of careful observation, he knew the terrain well. Yuuki weaved down side streets, emerging from alleys, nearly shaking off the four mages behind him. Chapter 39. What kind of magic is this? After him. This filthy commoner dares play tricks on us? He's begging to die. The four mages chased closely behind Yuuki, cruel smirks twisting their faces as they watched the boy stumble forward in apparent panic. They had roamed the royal capital for years. How could they not know every twist and turn of the streets? "Don't rush him. Spread out. Push him toward a quieter area." The eldest of the four snarled the order, a vicious glint flashing in his eyes. As the four split up to block the surrounding paths, Yuuki seemed even more panicked, stumbling left and right as he was gradually funneled toward the outer edges of the town, exactly as they intended. The surroundings became quieter. Fewer and fewer pedestrians walked the streets. It didn't take long. The mages watched Yuuki dart into a narrow alley and, seeing this, identical smiles crept across their faces. They knew this alley, it was a dead end. The dim, filthy passage reeked faintly from piles of trash tossed carelessly into corners. Yuuki finally slowed to a stop at the sealed-off wall at the end of the alley. "Ha, looks like I'm trapped." He exhaled heavily. Even with his good stamina, running at full speed for so long left him breathless. You damn commoner, you can really run, huh?" "Not running anymore? I want to see how far you think you can go now." Their ragged, angry voices echoed behind him. Yuuki turned around. The four mages had already closed off the entrance, approaching with twisted, feral expressions. "Don't bother struggling, boy. You offended a noble. No matter where you run, it won't save you." The leader stepped forward, glaring down with arrogant disdain. "But if you kneel for us right now, maybe, just maybe, we might feel generous enough to let your suffering be a little shorter." Despite the threatening approach, Yuuki showed not a trace of panic. "True. I really can't run anymore. But who said I'm the one who can't escape? Maybe. It's the four of you who can't." Yuuki lifted his hand slightly, flicking a sheet of paper between his fingers. The four mages froze instinctively. A map. The leader's expression changed instantly. The realization stabbed through him. Yuuki hadn't been cornered. He had led them here on purpose. He chose this alley. Whoosh! The moment they hesitated, Yuuki's eyes flashed sharply. His silver grimoire shot into the air, hovering before him. Wind magic, Tower of Storms. A fierce shout. Boom! In the span of a single breath, half his magic was drained. A massive column of spiraling winds erupted into existence, surging upward from the alley like a roaring dragon. The violent winds sucked in everything, trash, debris, loose stones, all swallowed by the towering cyclone. Because the alley was a dead end, Yuuki didn't have to worry about attackers behind him. One spell was enough to block their path. What kind of magic is that? One mage stumbled back in disbelief at the violent tornado cutting off their approach. So that's all it is. The leader sneered. The map had startled him. He thought Yuuki had some clever backup plan. But this? Just a blast of wind magic? A commoner was still a commoner. The tornado was strong, yes, but beating four trained mages with just this was impossible. Attack! The leader swung his arm. The other three quickly unleashed their magic. Blasts of elemental force slammed into the tornado, slowing its crawl forward. Seeing this, the four mages exhaled in relief, smiles creeping across their faces. Yuuki noticed this but remained completely calm. He quickly unfastened the bundle slung across his chest and took it down. These four mages were certainly strong, stronger than the young noble candidates in the entrance test. Just as a comparison, Yuno's noble opponent hadn't even managed to resist and had been swept into the tornado immediately. To most commoner mages, this level of skill was already impressive. But even the strongest had limits. At least none of these four could break through this spell. Yuuki admired the strength of the magic for a moment, then swung the bundle with a sudden force, hurling it straight into the tornado. Instantly, the package ripped apart. Bottled lamp oil spilled into the swirling winds, adding a streak of black to the already violent cyclone. "This is my real trump card." A smirk tugged at Yuki's lips. From his pocket, he pulled out the fire sticks he had bought earlier during the day and casually tossed them into the tornado. Blocked by the cyclone, the four mages couldn't see what he was doing behind them. All they noticed was a sudden tremor in the winds and then boom. The tornado transformed into a towering pillar of fire, flames roaring skyward. Heat and fire waves spread rapidly in all directions. The mages barely had time to react before a massive suction force erupted from the fiery vortex. The power far exceeded the tornado's previous effects. Terrified screams tore through the air as the four mages were helplessly sucked into the flaming maelstrom. Crack! After a short pause, Yuuki snapped his fingers. Bang! 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 The fire tornado vanished in an instant. Four charred figures plummeted from midair, hitting the alley's cobblestones with brutal force. One of them, the leader, landed directly in front of Yuuki. A faint, almost imperceptible smell of cooked flesh lingered in the air. Yuki's face paled slightly, but he quickly suppressed the discomfort rising in his chest. Compassion? That was for the strong. Weaklings had no right to pity. At least, Yuuki didn't consider himself strong. You. A charred hand trembled as it lifted from the ground, the weak, desperate voice barely audible. What magic? Yuuki watched calmly, eyes fixed on the figure before him. Just as water flows downward, heated air changes the flow of surrounding currents. That isn't magic, it's science. He spoke patiently, then raised his foot and kicked the mage in the neck. The scorched arm collapsed back to the ground. A glance at the remaining three showed that their grimoires were still intact. They still had a breath of life left. Good. Magic books willingly handed over? Of course they'd be devoured. Yuuki had not chosen this dead-end alley at random. Turning the tornado into a fire column was easy enough, but to achieve the full destructive force, he needed the right terrain. The alley's narrow space amplified the heat from the fire and the tornado's rotational force, rapidly generating strong air currents. Hot air surged upward, pulling in the cooler air. Yuuki stood at the dead end. The temperature changes affected nothing critical on his side. The four mages, trapped at the alley entrance, were hit by the rapid influx of cold air into the narrow passage, creating massive pressure. That's why they hadn't even had a chance to react before being sucked into the tornado. Thank you, 9 years of compulsory education. Yuuki chuckled internally, glancing toward the alley's exit. He knew the fight wasn't over yet. Chapter 40, The One Who Shouldn't Have Appeared. The alley reeked of burnt air, mixed with the usual stench of the narrow passage, making the smell even more unbearable. Yuuki ignored it, his eyes fixed on the entrance of the alley while he slowly restored his mana. Using the Tower of Storm spell to deal with the four mages was already the most mana-efficient method he could think of. Now the real challenge was about to begin. Come out. I know you're there. If these four are all you've got, then I'd say you've overestimated yourself, noble Meath. Yuuki said lightly, his voice calm and deliberate. Almost as soon as he finished speaking, a figure appeared at the entrance of the alley. Meath stepped in, his upper body clad in a finely tailored short shirt inlaid with silver patterns, his lower body wearing white noble trousers, and his boots lined with pristine fur. His expression was dark. Yuuki was momentarily stunned. He had expected Meath to hesitate, giving him more time to restore his mana. He had misjudged. In this world, commoners were nothing but ants to the nobility. A commoner shouting at him was reason enough for Meath to step forward, if only to maintain his pride. Clap. 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 Meath sniffed the burnt air, furrowed his brow, and slapped his hands together several times. I suspected these 4 idiots might not take you down, but I didn't expect them to be this pathetic. Truly disgusting. He glanced at the 4 nearly charred bodies, a twisted look of revulsion flashing across his face. Then he forced a smile and said, Yuuki, such talent and strength wasted outside the Magic Knights, follow me. I can give you wealth, prestige, and even a path to joining the Magic Knights. The tempting words echoed through the alley. Yuuki found it amusing. The noble Meath's attitude is truly unpredictable, he muttered inwardly. To be honest, I am a little tempted. But perhaps your offer is too distant for me, the sincerity feels lacking. Yuuki welcomed the delay. The more Meath spoke, the more time he gained to restore his mana. There was only one of him. Someone else must still be hiding in the shadows. That would be Meath's real trump card. Yuuki had already analyzed last night's events. Meath was likely a minor noble, not a citywide power. His entourage was limited. This gave Yuuki confidence in turning the tables. Of course, his true advantage lay in his magic-binding iron chain formation. Even a minor noble would have a capable mage guarding them. Once that mage was dealt with, victory would be Yuuki's. He had even prepared a safe retreat, just in case. Too far away? Meath's face darkened at Yuuki's taunt. He knew he wasn't Yuuki's match and deliberately kept his distance. Seeing the towering pillar of flame outside the alley, he had unconsciously begun to fear Yuuki. Pathetic, pathetic, all of them. Why hasn't the butler moved yet? Yuuki knew Meath's words were genuine temptations, but what Meath really wanted to see was Yuuki kneeling, begging for mercy. Yuuki was stalling to recover his mana. Meath was stalling too, hoping his butler would strike from the shadows. Why hadn't he acted? Was he waiting for orders? You filthy insect. I was generous enough to give you face and you refuse. Now kill him. Meath's forced smile vanished, replaced by a ferocious glare at Yuuki. Yuuki was already prepared. His eyes swept the surroundings, mana surging, ready to unleash a spell at any moment. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The alley was silent, not a sound stirred. Meath froze, bewildered. Yuuki remained focused, wary of any trick. He waited a little longer. Nothing happened. Butler. Meath shouted, his face red with anger and frustration. Still, no one appeared. Yuuki realized it wasn't a trick, something had gone wrong on Meath's side. A cold glint flashed in Yuuki's eyes. Whatever had happened, now was the perfect moment to strike at Meath. Step. Step. At that moment, a quiet set of footsteps echoed, soft but unmistakably clear. They didn't sound like steps on the ground, but on Yuuki's very heart. Each step made his chest tighten, his body stiffen, and an indescribable presence fill the alley. Yuuki suddenly felt breathless, unable to lift his head, a soul-shaking fear, like facing a top-tier predator. A captain-level figure. The thought flashed immediately in his mind. Suddenly, the oppressive presence vanished, replaced by a warm, calm, comforting magical aura. It was like standing under gentle sunlight. The terrifying sensation that had made him tremble felt like a mere illusion. Yuuki regained control of his body and hurriedly looked toward the alley entrance. A young man, smiling softly, walked calmly from outside. His hair pure white, tied in thin braids at the sides, with a magical eye emblem on his forehead. He wore simple clothing, a white robe overlaid with 3 golden eye-shaped patterns on the chest. He seemed remarkably gentle. But in his hands he carried a middle-aged mage with blood on his chest. Master, run, escape. The mage's weak voice barely reached Meath, who froze in place. Behind him, Yuuki's pupils constricted in shock and coldness. How did this person appear here? The leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun licked. Chapter 41. An invitation from the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. A warm and soothing magical aura filled the entire alley. Yuuki, who could sense the natural flow of magic in the air, for the first time truly felt the vitality of natural mana. Unfortunately, his sensing range was very limited, only about half a meter around him. If his perception were greater, he would have noticed all the surrounding natural mana gathering around Licht, celebrating in silent joy. It was mana's favor. The blessing of natural magic itself. Drip. Drip. The blood trickling from the wounds of the middle-aged butler dripped to the ground, plunging the alley into an eerie silence. Yuki's body tensed, disbelief coursing through him, and he instinctively stepped back. It wasn't cowardice. The power of the figure before him was simply terrifying. In the entire Clover Kingdom, before the elves reincarnated and before the demons appeared, only the Magic Emperor could rival this level of strength. This person was also one of the only 2 holders of a 4-leaf clover grimoire in the kingdom, wielding a rare light magic. Most importantly, he shouldn't even be here. The leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, Licht, also had another identity, William, the captain of the Golden Dawn. Normally, Licht rarely appeared in person. Even if it were William appearing here, Yuki might not have been so shocked. Run. The middle-aged butler, unconscious and limp, murmured the word run repeatedly as Licht held him aloft. Click. With a slight movement of Licht's hand, the murmuring ceased and the butler's head slumped. Thud. The body hit the ground, producing a dull sound, making Meath flinch in fear and stiffen. Who are you? I'm a noble. Meath's face went pale, his voice trembling with false bravado. Licht's warm expression remained unchanged as he stepped forward calmly. Meath's face drained of color, panic overtaking him as he tried to use magic, but his grimoire had just begun to levitate. A flash of golden light. Shua! Meath felt a sharp pain in his chest, as if all his strength had been drained in an instant. Looking down, he discovered a light sword had pierced his chest. Licht had already passed by Meath and was walking toward Yuki, never once glancing at Meath. Too fast. Yuki's eyes stayed fixed ahead, yet he still couldn't discern how Licht had struck. All he saw was the golden light flash, and Meath had already been pierced by the sword. So strong. A single casual strike, not even blockable or traceable, let alone dodged. When Licht reached Yuki, Meath's body finally collapsed, the light sword wound dropping him to the ground with a soft thud, kicking up dust. Yuki's throat moved slightly as he looked at Licht, now only a few steps away, and for the first time he didn't feel the same tension as before. I know your name, Yuki. And I understand the magic you wield. Licht's golden eyes looked gently at Yuki, his voice filled with kindness and softness. Yuki's heart skipped a beat. He quickly realized that Licht likely only meant he understood Yuki's replication techniques. Don't be nervous. The Magic Knight's entry test isn't exactly a secret. Licht seemed to notice Yuki's tension, smiling gently as he explained, I am Licht, leader of the White Knight Magic Eye. I wish to invite you to join us. Yuki froze in shock. He had considered all sorts of reasons for Licht appearing, but never had he expected this. Inviting him to join the White Knight Magic Eye? Why? His face remained cautiously wary and he took a step back. Of course, this wasn't just for show, Yuki genuinely feared and respected Licht. The Clover Kingdom was dangerous. The Eye of the Midnight Sun was even more so. Seeing Yuki's cautious expression, Licht wasn't surprised. Instead, his face took on an even more sincere look. The arrogant noble captains looked down on you. They did not choose you because they didn't understand your magic. I, however, understand the strength of your magic better than anyone, because a close friend of mine possesses similar magic to yours. Licht spoke warmly and sincerely, his tone full of respect and acknowledgement for Yuki. If Yuki didn't know Licht's other identity as William, one of the captains who had refrained from raising their hand during the entry test, he might have been moved by these words. After all, after experiencing the disappointment of no captain acknowledging him during the test, to suddenly meet someone powerful who truly recognized his magic, many mages would have been emotionally touched. A close friend? The only ones Licht could consider a close friend were elves. Yuki briefly wondered if he might somehow be a host for an elf like Yuno or William. But he quickly dismissed the thought. If that were the case, his mana would not be so limited. The close friend Licht spoke of was likely Raya, one of the 3 eyes of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, a magic imitator whose abilities resembled Yuki's. Yuki fell silent. The moment Licht extended the invitation, Yuki realized he had no choice. Despite Licht's gentle, kind demeanor, he was just as merciless when killing. Was he only to passively accept this choice? Yuki lifted his head once more, meeting Licht's golden gaze full of expectation. I want to know exactly what your organization does, he said, taking a deep breath. He knew the organization's purpose well enough, but he had to ask to avoid suspicion. At the same time, Yuki realized something else. Though he still didn't know why Licht invited him, the timing of his appearance was too precise. Almost as if it had been carefully orchestrated. Had he not known that Licht and William shared a dual soul in one body, he might not have even suspected. The result of the final hand-raising in the Magic Knight's entry test was likely William's doing, causing no captain to raise their hand. Though it was only a guess, to Yuuki it was the only explanation for the apparent coincidence. Chapter 42, Building a New Kingdom? The early stages are easy. So what exactly does the White Knight Magic Eye do? Hearing the question, Licht's gentle expression softened even further as he smiled and replied, "What do you think of the royal capital?" Yuuki blinked. He hadn't expected Licht to turn the question back on him. "It's prosperous." Yuuki thought for a moment and answered with two simple words. "That's right." "How does it compare to places outside the Clover Kingdom's capital?" Licht slightly lifted his head, golden eyes shimmering with an unusual charm. Images of the impoverished Haji village and the bustling capital appeared in Yuuki's mind. The contrast was stark, like two different worlds. "Coming from a border village, you've probably noticed the flaws in this kingdom," Licht continued, his calm voice echoing through the alley. "Some people hover on the brink of starvation, while others waste food they cannot finish. Those with great magical power are still judged by their birth. Those born in different countries are even harmed in the name of justice. It is precisely because of these flaws that we came into being. To correct this decaying kingdom, we punish sin with sin." Licht paused, lowering his gaze to Yuuki. His gentle voice carried a hint of humility. "Let us take our revenge on the Clover Kingdom and build a new kingdom of our own, Yuuki." Yuuki lowered his head, his lips twitching sharply. He began to understand why the members of the White Knight Magic Eye were so loyal, even willing to die rather than reveal a single secret about the organization. Even knowing that Licht's words might be false, Yuuki still felt a surge of excitement. Not to mention the rank-and-file members of the White Knight Magic Eye, who knew nothing at all. But in the end it was all an illusion. Otherwise, with Licht's personal charisma combined with the hopes of commoners, lower-class citizens, and magic users oppressed by the nobility, it might actually be possible to overthrow the Clover Kingdom's royal and noble rulers. "I'm not interested in building some so-called new kingdom," Yuuki said, lifting his head to meet Licht's gaze. His eyes were calm as he continued, "But I do want to improve the lives of the people around me." Licht did not notice the subtle tone of hope in Yuuki's words. Hearing them, his smile grew even brighter. "Welcome to the White Knight Magic Eye. I'll take you to meet our comrades." Licht spoke gently, but then his tone shifted slightly. "Yuuki, being kind is good, but kindness to one's enemies is not always wise." Licht's eyes scanned the four magic users previously defeated by Yuuki, their bodies charred and unconscious. Yuuki twitched his eyelid. He hadn't spared them out of mercy, he wanted to devour their grimoires. Before Yuuki could respond, four golden beams shot toward the positions of the four magic users in an instant. No loud explosion rang out. It was like snow melting under the sun. Once the golden beams struck, the four magic users turned to ashes and vanished. This wasn't magic, just a pure mana-based attack. Licht then turned slightly, raising his hand toward Meath and the body of the butler behind him, preparing to repeat the same action. "Wait." Yuuki spoke up immediately. "What is it?" Licht paused, turning to look at Yuuki in confusion. Could you leave Meath to me?" Yuuki asked quietly. Finally having the chance to get a few grimoires, Yuuki couldn't let this opportunity slip away. The four magic users' grimoires had vanished along with their lives. But just now he noticed that Meath's grimoire hadn't disappeared, indicating that he still had a breath of life left. If Meath had died, Yuuki's risky maneuver would have yielded nothing at all. Of course, joining the White Knight Magic Eye was an unexpected bonus. "No problem." Licht smiled faintly. In the blink of an eye, he vanished from his original spot and reappeared beside Meath. With a casual gesture, golden beams shot forth, reducing the nearby butler's corpse to ashes. Then, Licht lowered his arm toward Meath and spoke softly. "Light restoration magic, healing light particles." A gentle white glow instantly enveloped Meath. His chest, previously pierced, visibly began to clot and heal at an astonishing pace. In less than a single breath, all of Meath's wounds were fully restored. However, due to the prior blood loss, his complexion remained pale, and he remained unconscious. Clearly, Licht had only repaired Meath's injuries enough to prevent him from bleeding out, leaving the full recovery for later. With another flash of movement, Licht carried the unconscious Meath in one hand and reappeared beside Yuuki. Whoosh! A grimoire flew from Lick's hand and landed in Yuki's. From now on, his life is in your hands. Lick's gentle smile remained as he spoke to Yuki. Yuki looked at Meath's grimoire in his hands, suppressing the surge of excitement, and respectfully said, "Thank you, Lord Licht. We are comrades, aren't we?" Lick's voice remained soft and kind. Yuki's face showed gratitude, though his heart was unusually calm. Don't let Lick's warmth fool you. He treated every member of the White Knight Magic Eye this way, giving them genuine attention and care. This wasn't an act, it was real. Indeed, Lick genuinely cared for every member of the White Knight Magic Eye, fulfilling requests whenever possible. If a member was injured, he would feel sorrow and anger. If a member was captured, he would stop at nothing to rescue them. He was, without a doubt, an excellent and capable leader. This was also one of the core reasons all members of the White Knight Magic Eye devoted themselves fully, even willing to die for him. The deeper reason? Of course, it was that they were crucial offerings to revive the long-dead elf tribe. How could Licht bear to see these living sacrifices suffer or die? This was also why Yuki had never seriously considered joining the White Knight Magic Eye. Still, there were advantages. At least until Licht collected all the magic stones, the White Knight Magic Eye was easy to blend into. It could truly be described as a loving, united family. Let's go. Licht carried the unconscious Meath in one hand and placed his other hand on Yuki's shoulder. In the blink of an eye, the three of them vanished from the alley. Chapter 43, Core Members and the Soul-Linked Corpse Magic. Gulabit Rock Belt. One of the high magic zones at the border of the Clover Kingdom, and also the base of the White Knight Magic Eye. High magic zones are regions filled with unusual magical phenomena and traps, extremely dangerous places where mana flows chaotically. The chaotic mana here is strong enough to affect even a mage's own magical energy. Each high magic zone varies in danger, but none are areas ordinary mages can safely tread. The Gulabit Rock Belt features numerous floating rocks and is shrouded in dense mist year-round. Placing a base here makes it extremely difficult to detect. At this moment, Yuki stood inside a massive floating castle. Though called a castle, it looked more like a small mountain hollowed out and converted into a fortress. In the slightly dim corridors of rock, Licht walked at the front, followed by two figures. One, naturally, was Yuki. The other was a somewhat frail man with short, silver, wavy hair, red markings on both cheeks, and a white robe bearing the three magic eyes emblem. He was silent, his expression so pale at first glance that he looked almost corpse-like. Yuki walked beside him. In the empty corridor, the only sound was the echo of their footsteps. For ordinary people, the unfamiliar environment combined with the hollow echoes would make their hearts race and fill them with an inexplicable fear. Yuki cast a glance at the silver-haired man beside him. The weight in his gaze conveyed a seriousness that belied the silence. Walters, one of the core members of the White Knight Magic Eye. Master of spatial magic, capable of large-scale teleportation, the organization's spatial mage. Yuki had arrived here thanks to Walter's spatial magic, which had teleported him and Licht. In the Black Clover world, few mages wield spatial magic. Among them, even fewer can perform large-scale teleportation. Yuki felt a twinge of admiration. Any organization or faction without a spatial mage was considered second-rate. Spatial magic grants unmatched mobility. Without it, an organization could easily be outclassed. Sensing Yuki's gaze, Walter slightly nodded at him before turning his head back, remaining taciturn. Though a simple gesture, Yuki could sense the suspicion and vigilance on Walter's face. A bright light appeared ahead in the corridor. Yuki's expression stiffened, his body tensing. Compared to Walter's caution, he knew this was the real test. Passing it would keep him safe until the elf tribe reincarnated. "Lord Licht, why did you summon us here all of a sudden?" a low, hoarse voice asked. Hee, apparently to introduce a new member. "And we get to see Lord Licht again," a female voice added, tinged with a hint of mania in her laughter. "They're here," the low, hoarse voice repeated. Whoosh! 3 figures emerged from the corridor, with Licht walking calmly at the forefront. The moment Yuki stepped into the space, his vision opened to a vast hall, a colossal chamber about 10 meters high. The hall was encircled by rock walls, riddled with irregular passages likely leading to other parts of the fortress. There was no decoration, only massive, irregular stone pillars topped with enormous magical lamps, casting a bright glow across the hall. Yuki, Licht, and Walters entered through one of these portals. Upon entry, Yuki immediately sensed extremely active natural mana. Lord Licht. Lord Licht. Two voices, respectful yet excited, called out, the same two Yuki had overheard outside the corridor. Whoosh! One figure dashed forward, stopping beside Licht. It's been so long, Lord Licht, hee. A girl wore a revealing red top and short skirt, half-frame red glasses, and a white robe with the three magic eyes emblem draped loosely over her. Large swaths of her pale skin were exposed. At this moment, the girl's face was filled with excitement and admiration as she looked at Licht. Indeed, it's been a while, Sally. Licht looked at the girl in front of him, a gentle smile on his face as he lifted his hand to lightly smooth her slightly tousled brown hair. Let me introduce you to Yuki. This is Sally, and over there is Radis. Like Walters, they are core members of the White Knight Magic Eye. Licht then turned his gaze to Yuki behind him, smiling as he continued the introduction. Yuki first looked at the girl named Sally. A gel magic user, a sadistic scientist who would never stop investigating anything she found interesting until she understood it completely. She was nicknamed the Scientist Glasses Girl. This girl was undoubtedly one of the top scientists in the entire Clover Kingdom. She had developed cloning technology single-handedly. The other, a gloomy man named Radis, wore tight dark red pants and top, with a cloak draped over him that looked somewhat tattered and worn. He wielded corpse magic. By infusing mana into corpses, he could control them freely at will. The magic Radis possessed was also one of the abilities Yuki most wanted to master, as it was a rare magic linked to the soul. It was Radis' corpse magic that had allowed him to escape the deadly situation when Licht attempted to sacrifice the souls of all White Knight Magic Eye members. Weak mana. Radis glanced at Yuki, disdain curling his lips. Wow. Handsome guy. A shout of excitement rang out as Sally's eyes sparkled, and she dashed in front of Yuki, scanning him with uncontainable enthusiasm, a cheerful grin on her face. Are you the new member Lord Licht mentioned? As she spoke, she lifted her head and began sniffing Yuki's arm. Hee, I smell a special type of magic. I just have to taste it. Her red eyes glinted as she muttered to herself. Then, suddenly, she opened her mouth and bit down on Yuki's arm. Yuki immediately noticed her action, his body flashing back as he narrowly evaded her. He certainly didn't want to be bitten by this slightly unhinged glasses girl. Chapter 44, The So-Called Elf Reincarnators, The Formidable Raya. Sally blinked her red eyes, stomping her feet and shouting in frustration as she missed her strike. You actually dodged it. It'd be abnormal not to dodge. Yuki's expression remained calm as he spoke lightly. Just let me take a bite. Sally's figure shifted, and a pale purple gelatinous substance surged from beneath her feet. It formed a soft cloud-like gel that lifted her into the air, propelling her toward Yuki. Flying magic? Yuki's expression flickered slightly. He hadn't mastered any flying-type magic techniques, and there was no way to evade Sally as she came hurtling down from above. For mages, flight is a very convenient form of movement, though most cannot develop flying-type magic. They usually need magical tools like flying brooms to take to the air. Of course, some mages are naturally capable of mastering aerial movement effortlessly. For example, the wind magic used by Yuno requires no special development. By coating oneself in wind-attributed mana and attaining sufficient control, one can fly with ease. But the gel magic Sally was using clearly did not belong to this light, wind-based category. Yet she could still fly, which spoke volumes about her talent. Whoosh! A golden whip of light shot up, wrapping around Sally's waist and pulling her down from the sky. Stop messing around, Sally. Licht's voice, both gentle and exasperated, reached them. He then turned to Yuki. That's just her personality. You'll be comrades from now on, so don't mind it. Yuki straightened his expression and bowed slightly. Of course, Lord Licht. Licht's face showed satisfaction at Yuki's response. He patted Sally on the shoulder, signaling her to stop causing trouble. Besides those three, there are 3 more important members I want to introduce to you. Licht smiled and pointed ahead. Almost as the word down was spoken, he transformed into a beam of golden light, vanishing from where he stood. When he reappeared, Licht was standing at the center of a stone pillar, arms spread wide as if embracing the sun. Boom! Within the half-meter range of Yuki's perception, all natural mana suddenly became more active and restless. At that moment, Yuki suddenly noticed 3 figures appearing at 3 positions not far from Licht. When did they appear? Suppressing his shock, Yuuki looked up. They are the three strongest demonic eyes of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, Fana, Veto, and Raya. Each of them possesses power greater than the captains of the Magic Knights. Yuuki, do you now believe that we can exact revenge on the Clover Kingdom and rebuild a brand new kingdom? Lick's confident yet gentle voice echoed from above. Sally, Raids, and Valtos bowed respectfully to the four standing on the stone pillar, each casting a glance of surprise at Yuuki. They had originally assumed that Lord Licht had only brought back a new companion. But the appearance of the three demonic eyes lords, along with Lick's words just now, made it clear how much he valued Yuuki. Not only were Sally and the others surprised, Yuuki himself hadn't expected that, after just joining the Eye of the Midnight Sun, he would meet the other three elf reincarnators. The so-called elf reincarnators refers to those who, through the forbidden technique Evil Eye, attach the soul of an elf to a human whose body and magical attributes are similar, achieving a form of reincarnation. This reincarnation differs from the one Yuno and William possess, which is a dual soul state. Theirs can be considered an incomplete reincarnation. However, as the technique is forbidden, it naturally carries certain drawbacks. Not only is power reduced, but emotions and feelings are negatively affected, leaving the mind extremely unstable. That is why Licht sought to gather mana stones, to use the combined power of all mana stones to reincarnate the entire elf race while eliminating the negative effects of the forbidden technique. Yuuki subconsciously swallowed, feeling both awed and honored. Yuuki was almost frightened by how much attention was being shown to him. Among the three demonic eyes, the one Yuuki feared most was Raya. Not only because of Raya's mimicry magic, but also because he had an innate ability to see through lies. In other words, any falsehood Yuuki spoke would immediately be detected by Raya. Fana appeared as a sweet girl with pink hair, a fire magic user. She sat at the edge of the left stone pillar, her fair legs dangling lazily. Veto, with casually shoulder-length golden hair and a burly frame resembling a humanoid lion, was a beast magic user. He sat cross-legged at the center stone pillar. Raya, a mimicry magic user, lay directly on the rightmost stone pillar, yawning repeatedly, a very lazy young man. Though the three simply sat as they pleased, the entire air of the giant hall grew heavy and oppressive. Yuuki knew that the real test had begun. Every word he spoke from this point on had to be carefully measured. "Why yes, Lord Licht," Yuuki said, bowing respectfully. He deliberately avoided saying words like "I believe" to introduce conceptual ambiguity. Licht's gentle expression softened even further. "The reason I've brought Yuuki here today is that starting today he is, like Sally, a core member of the White Knight Demon Eye." "What?" Sally and Walters exchanged shocked glances. "Lord Licht, how can this be? He just joined the White Knight Demon Eye, how can he become a core member?" Raids, who wielded corpse spirit magic, frowned in disbelief and spoke out, his tone sharp and intense. Clack! The sound of chains snapping echoed suddenly through the air. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chains shot up from beneath Raids' feet. Before he could react, they had already bound him in place. Chain magic, iron binding array. Yuuki, holding his grimoire, turned to face the bound Raids. No one had expected Yuuki to act without warning, neither Raids nor Sally nor Walters. Yet the two who witnessed it made no move, standing frozen in place. Sally's wide red eyes gleamed with interest as she looked at Yuuki. Valtos showed no outward expression, but his eyes had widened slightly from their usual squint, clearly surprised by Yuuki's bold action. "That is Lord Licht's command. How dare you oppose it?" Yuuki's voice was cold, a trace of anger evident. He appeared as a staunch supporter of Licht, allowing no opposition. Chapter 45, For Lord Licht. The Delivered Spatial Magic. Upon hearing Yuuki's words laced with anger, Walter's suspicion and wariness toward him vanished, replaced with recognition and approval. Just as Yuuki had said, in Walter's eyes, everything Lord Licht spoke was correct. Yuuki, however, didn't notice the shift in Walter's gaze. At this moment, he was completely immersed in his role. Before entering the massive hall, Yuuki had been replaying the entire encounter with Licht in his mind, checking if there had been anything suspicious in his behavior. The result? Yuuki realized that he had come across as a bit too composed. Fortunately, Licht didn't know him well. But now that Licht had just declared him a core member, appearing too calm could be problematic. Anyone with even a hint of perception could tell that the Eye of the Midnight Sun was an extremely powerful organization. How could a core member remain without any emotional reaction? After all, Yuuki was only a 15-year-old boy. At that very moment, Raids suddenly lunged forward. Such a perfect opportunity. Yuuki immediately counterattacked, simultaneously showing his reverence for Lord Licht and displaying the impulsiveness appropriate for a 15-year-old. Originally, Yuuki had wanted to be even more aggressive, but recalling how composed he had seemed at first in front of Licht, he restrained himself somewhat. Acting? Back in Hage Village, Yuuki, Asta and Yuno often engaged in mental sparring with father and sister Lily. He could handle a bit of performance when needed. At least from the perspective of Licht and the others, Yuuki appeared as a boy who revered Licht, was composed, decisive, yet a little impulsive. Raid's face darkened. Seeing the chains binding him, he realized he was actually being attacked. "You little brat. You're asking for death." A murderous rage welled up in Raid's eyes as he let out a roar. But the next moment, Raid's expression changed. He realized he couldn't access any of his mana, as if he had completely lost it. Seeing Raids in this state, Sally and Walters exchanged a glance, apparently realizing that this chain magic was not ordinary. A faint smile appeared in Yuki's eyes. This was the true power of chain magic. Once a target was bound, pairing it with an offensive spell could easily eliminate them, making it easy to catch opponents off guard. Of course, this magic is only effective against mages who are not too strong. Mages at Licht or Captain level can easily sense the mana fluctuations from chain magic and avoid it. Without some form of magical concealment, trying to bind a Captain-level mage with chain magic would be as impossible as a normal person killing a Captain-level mage with a single punch. For Lord Licht, atone with your life. Yuki's face burned with anger as he swung his hand again. The pages of his silver grimoire flipped rapidly. Wind magic, Tower of the Tempest. Rumble. A powerful gust instantly twisted into a roaring tornado, sweeping toward Raids. Chain magic and wind magic. This young man truly wields unique spells. Sally exclaimed, leaping backward to avoid the tornado's path, clearly excited. Raid struggled with all his strength, unable to break free from the chains. His face turned beet red, and seeing the approaching tornado, it paled further. Damn it! Raid's expression turned pitch black as he let out a low growl. Bound by strange chains, completely unable to use his mana, if the tornado struck him, he would almost certainly die. The feeling of utter frustration was one Radis hadn't experienced in years, ever since he had been expelled from the Magic Knights. Despite his strength, he had been outmaneuvered by a mere kid. Meanwhile, as Yuuki used his wind magic, Fana and Veto, sitting on their respective stone pillars and looking rather uninterested in the commotion below, exchanged glances. Both seemed to direct their thoughtful gaze toward the drowsy Raya on the far pillar. Oh! Raya lazily squinted his eyes. All right, Yuuki, stop. Licht's gentle, slightly exasperated voice came from above. Yes, Lord Licht. Yuuki had already anticipated Licht's intervention. As he withdrew his magic, he still maintained a slight look of displeasure toward Radis, letting out a cold hum. As the tornado and chains vanished, Radis regained his freedom, but his unpleasant expression remained unchanged. With Licht present, Radis dared not make any move against Yuuki. Moreover, after what had just occurred, he wouldn't underestimate Yuuki again. Yuuki becoming a core member is settled. All four of you are comrades now, cooperate with each other. Licht's gentle voice continued from the stone pillars, adding, As for your magic, if you don't mind, you can explain it to everyone. Licht seemed to be giving Yuuki the choice, but Yuuki knew exactly which decision would be most advantageous. Yes, Lord Licht. My magic is replication magic. By touching another mage's grimoire with my own, I can replicate any magical techniques they've mastered. Yuuki spoke earnestly, without hiding anything. Hearing what Yuuki could do, Radis, Sally, and Valtos all showed expressions of surprise, their eyes glancing involuntarily toward one of the demonic eyes, Raya. Radis instinctively tightened his grip on his own grimoire, but Raya seemed completely uninterested, still lying lazily on the stone pillar. Licht nodded gently at Yuuki. Valtos, let Yuuki replicate your spatial magic. Leave the intelligence gathering in the royal capital to him. Having spatial magic will improve efficiency and safety, saving you the trouble of going back and forth alone. Licht's voice was as gentle as ever, yet to Yuuki it sounded like the most beautiful music. He had never imagined spatial magic would be so effortlessly at his disposal. In Yuki's plans, rule-based magic like spatial magic had always been reserved for last, yet he had acquired it so easily, giving him a sense of disbelief. Yes, Lord Licht. Valtos bowed respectfully, showing no trace of resentment. Instead, he nodded kindly to Yuki. For everything for Lord Licht. Yuki's expression hardened and he spoke loudly. Everything is for Lord Licht. If he had known that following Licht would bring such easy rewards, why bother joining the Magic Knights? Chapter 46, the so-called certain death situation, 3 ways to overcome it. Inside the vast empty hall of the castle. Yuki and the others had already left, leaving only Licht, Vit, Fana, and Raya standing atop the stone pillars. Licht's golden eyes glinted with a faint smile as he looked at Raya and spoke gently. How is it? Ha! Raya rubbed his black and white hair, yawning lazily as he said with mild exasperation. That boy didn't lie. Licht chuckled softly. If Yuki were here hearing this exchange, he would probably laugh. Of course he hadn't lied, he had merely concealed part of his magical abilities. Giving me trouble again, Licht. But honestly, you don't need to be so careful. Raya stretched and spoke quietly. Indeed. With our strength, there's no need to fear those Magic Knight captains. Veto cracked his neck with a rough creak, a disdainful smirk on his rugged face. The royal family and nobility of the Clover Kingdom aren't the weak humans they were 500 years ago. They've stolen our power and grown far too strong. And the Wizard King's power, even after all my secret observations, I still don't know the full extent of his abilities. Licht shook his head gently, his expression turning serious. No matter what, we must be fully prepared. That Yuki possesses magic similar to yours. Even if something goes wrong, Raya could use his body to reincarnate again. Licht then looked at Veto and Fana, a hint of apology on his face. Unfortunately, despite searching for so long, we haven't found other bodies compatible with your souls. Sally's research on cloning technology isn't yet mature. We don't know if it'll even be usable when the time comes. Vit rose from his stone pillar, swinging his arms with a grin. Licht, I have no intention of losing to those humans. Fana lifted her head slightly, a terrifying surge of magical energy radiating from her. All those humans deserve to die. Don't worry. It won't be long now. Licht's golden eyes shimmered as he murmured softly to himself. Suddenly, 4 incredible surges of magical energy erupted. In that vast empty hall, all natural mana violently surged in response, an astonishing display of power. Morning. Deep within the forest outside Hage Village, the chirping of birds filled the air. A small clearing with few trees had long been a training ground for Yuki and Asta. Ever since Yuki and the others had left Haji Village, no one had come here. Suddenly, a surge of magical energy appeared, and a dark spatial portal rose from the ground. The next moment, Yuki stepped out of the black portal, wearing the white robes marked with the emblem of the 3 demonic eyes. Bang! The unconscious Meath was tossed to the ground first, letting out a dull thud. Spatial magic really does consume a lot of mana. Yuki said as he waved his hand to close the portal, a faint, almost imperceptible pallor crossing his face. He sank to the ground. Originally, he had planned to return straight to the royal capital, but the distance was too great. His mana wouldn't last long enough to transport him all the way there. Fortunately, the Eye of the Midnight Sun's base was already on the border of the Clover Kingdom. Though not close to Hage Village, it was far enough to recover mana first. He needed to restore his energy. Yuki inhaled the fresh forest air and sat with his eyes closed in meditation. After about 30 minutes, the mana he had expended was fully restored. Reopening his eyes, Yuki focused his thoughts. The silver grimoire floated in front of him, and the rapid rustle of turning pages filled the air. Magic. Wind magic, Tower of Storms. Spatial magic, teleportation. Spatial magic, dimensional space. Chain magic, magic binding iron chain formation. Yuki glanced at the newly updated spells in his grimoire and smiled. The risk he had taken this time had been bold, but the reward was substantial. Under Licht's instructions, he had acquired 2 spatial magics from Valtos, replacing his previous water healing and serpent dance. Teleportation required no further explanation. Dimensional space, however, was another ability of Valtos's spatial magic. It could create an independent space, the size of which depended on the mana expended. Every spatial mage had variations in their magic. Valtos's spatial magic, in addition to basic teleportation, allowed him to open a separate dimension. During the defense of the royal capital, Valtos had used this skill to ambush the captain of the Red Lion King squad, Fugolian, teleporting him into a prepared dimensional space. This allowed Lick to attack Fugolian within that space, resulting in the captain losing an arm and being severely wounded, a setback that delayed this powerful combatant until late in the Elf arc. This is no small problem. Yuuki tugged at his collar, revealing a mark on his shoulder shaped like a magical eye. Looking at the mark, a cold smile crossed his face. According to Licht, this was the symbol of an eye of the Midnight Sun member, but Yuuki knew better. This wasn't some decorative emblem. It was the mark of a forbidden sacrificial technique, a sure-death situation, for anyone who joined the White Knight Demon Eye. Licht valued him so highly because Yuuki was intended as a new body for Raya should anything happen, a body compatible with Raya's soul. For Yuuki, who understood the story, this was obvious. Their magics were similar, indicating a degree of soul compatibility. In the anime, Veto and Fana were both defeated and killed, only to be reincarnated via Sally's cloning technology. At this point in time, however, Sally's tech was clearly still imperfect. With the magical eye sacrificial mark, even if Raya couldn't use Yuki's body, it could serve as a backup offering. After all, why not add an extra layer of insurance? Lick's foresight was thorough. Yuki's cold smile deepened. However, the real danger of Raya's reincarnation wasn't Yuki's concern. He was the one among the three demonic eyes who always survived to the end. The true threat was the sacrificial forbidden technique itself. A normal mage facing this technique would have no chance of survival. Yet Yuuki didn't feel nervous. He knew 3 ways to overcome it. Reanimation magic. Demon-slaying sword. Anti-magic. Even without considering the first 2 methods, Yuki's connection with Asta made borrowing anti-magic quite simple. Until Licht collected all the magic stones, this sacrificial technique wasn't particularly dangerous. Now it's time to test my fully replicated abilities. Yuuki pulled out a red grimoire, lifting his head toward the nearby unconscious Myasur. A faint smile crossed his face as he murmured softly to himself. Chapter 47, Complete Replication. A soul? Yuuki held the red grimoire and stared at Meath, who had been thrown onto the grass earlier. A sudden smile appeared on his face. Nobleman, how long are you going to keep playing dead? Meath remained motionless, lying face down on the ground. Don't worry, it's just you and me here. Yuuki said this with a gentle smile. Bang! The previously motionless Meath suddenly scrambled to his feet and turned to run in the opposite direction. Seeing this, Yuuki shook his head. Magic binding iron chain formation. Clack, clack, clack. Several chains shot up from the ground, instantly binding the fleeing Meath in place. Your grimoire is in my hands. How could you possibly think you could escape? Yuuki said, a hint of exasperation in his voice. Let me go. Let me go. You little insect, I am a noble. Despair painted Meath's face as he screamed wildly. This place is deep in the forest, no one comes here. Shout all you want, it won't help. Yuki's tone remained calm and almost kind. My money, I'll give you all the money you want. Please just let me go. I'm a noble. If I disappear, my family will never forgive you. Meath struggled desperately, alternating between pleading, begging, and threatening. He seemed on the verge of breaking down. Yuuki picked up Meath's red grimoire and, without hesitation, placed it on top of his own silver grimoire. When did you think I'd be afraid of such threats? Quiet. Let's do a little experiment first. He raised his hand and a chain immediately sealed Meath's shouting mouth. Meath's face contorted with fear, and all he could do was make muffled sounds. Much better, Yuuki murmured. He lowered his gaze to the 2 grimoires stacked in his hands, a serious expression crossing his face. Complete replication. Whoosh! Silver magic surged from Yuki's grimoire, instantly enveloping Meath's red grimoire, just as it had during previous spell replications. But the next moment, the red grimoire began to melt, as if it were liquid, rapidly absorbed into the silver grimoire. This astonishing sight caused Meath's muffled cries to stop mid-sound. His eyes widened in shock and disbelief. Within a few seconds, the red grimoire was completely absorbed. Yuuki felt a jolt in his mind, his vision momentarily spun. When it cleared, he saw an incredible sight. Where Meath had been, a fully transparent ethereal body identical to him appeared. What is this? Yuuki was stunned. Before he could comprehend it, his perspective shifted, and he saw himself. Yes. Yuuki saw himself as if a strange third-person viewpoint had appeared out of nowhere. However, this wasn't his physical body in reality, but another ethereal body identical to his own. Could this be a soul? Yuki's eyes widened in disbelief. His complete replication ability could even affect souls? Wait, something's different. Yuuki suddenly realized that his soul and Meath's soul were not the same. Meath's soul looked extremely ethereal and transparent, hazy and indistinct. Most importantly, at the center of Meath's soul was a red, fist-sized sphere of energy. Compared to the rest of his hazy soul, this red energy was strikingly vivid. From it, Yuuki sensed a scorching aura, the power of Meath's fire magic. He had known from the start that in the world of Black Clover, a mage's magic was inherently linked to their soul. How exactly the connection worked, Yuuki did not know. But now, seeing the fist-sized red energy within Meath's soul, he had an insight. Meath's fire magic was connected to this hidden red energy at the core of his soul. This must be what they call the source of mana. But his soul was completely different from Meath's. If Meath's soul was ethereal and transparent, Yuuki's was solid and clear. That alone would have been enough to mark a difference, but the true distinction lay deeper. Yuuki's soul contained nothing resembling a source of mana. Not only that, it was empty, yet the entire soul radiated a faint silver hue. This stark contrast left Yuuki puzzled and slightly bewildered. No source of mana, then how had he obtained replication magic? He gazed at his faintly silver soul, thoughtful. Yuuki was not one to obsess over small details. Since he couldn't figure it out, he decided to put the question aside for the time being. Yuuki's attention returned to his silver-hued soul. Suddenly, a faint silver light swept from his soul over Meath's. Then, within Yuuki's soul, a surge of energy began to form. The energy grew rapidly, almost like a one-to-one print, transforming into a source of mana identical to the red energy within Meath's soul. Though the process seemed slow, it happened in an instant. In the blink of an eye, a fist-sized red source of mana appeared in Yuuki's soul. In a daze, Yuuki withdrew from the unusual third-person perspective and looked forward again. Meath was still staring at him in shock, clearly stunned that his grimoire had been completely absorbed. Yuuki's gaze flickered slightly at the sight. That earlier third-person perspective had been a glimpse into a unique spiritual realm, one Meath could not perceive. Moreover, although Yuuki had felt he was observing the differences between their two souls for quite some time, in the outside world, only an instant had passed. Flap, flap. The silver grimoire floating before him suddenly opened, flipping rapidly to the final page. And there it was. Where there should have only been 4 pages, a 5th page had appeared, filled with an array of strange magical script. Slowly, the words faded back into the page itself. Magic. Wind magic, Tower of the Storm spatial magic, spatial teleportation spatial magic, pocket dimension chain magic, magic binding iron chain formation fire magic. With fire magic appearing on the new page, Yuuki suddenly felt an entirely new surge of magical energy flowing through him. His mana was increasing, boiling, rising within him. Chapter 48. Who says developing magic requires great talent? A sudden surge of mana radiated off Yuuki's body in waves, spreading outward. The sensation was unique and exhilarating, like a person starving for 2 or 3 days suddenly seeing a table full of food. The continuously increasing mana filled every part of Yuuki's body, making him feel as if he were basking in winter sunlight, warm and comfortable. He hadn't felt anything like this since obtaining his grimoire. After a while, the boiling mana inside Yuuki finally began to settle. My mana capacity has more than doubled compared to before, he murmured, clenching his fists, feeling strength coursing through him. Previously, he could only cast Tower of Storm twice. Now his mana was enough for 5 casts. Judging by grimoire domain levels, Yuuki's mana had reached the upper limit of the 7th domain. Don't underestimate the increase, this came from just absorbing a single grimoire. Imagine absorbing more, his mana would reach staggering heights. But that wasn't all. Yuuki closed his eyes and focused on sensing the surrounding area. 1 meter. 2 meters. 3 meters. 4 meters. 5 meters. My perception range has expanded from half a meter to 5 meters, he muttered, eyes widening in surprise. The flow of natural mana around him had become clearer. This overall boost in power far exceeded his expectations. He had originally thought that complete replication was simply consuming a grimoire to gain the magic it contained. But reality was entirely different. Consuming the grimoire wasn't the key, it was merely a medium. Grimoires are intimately connected to the mage's soul, and consuming the grimoire creates a link to the mage's soul. Through this link, Yuuki could replicate the source of mana within the other mage's soul into his own. Fire magic. Yuuki raised his hand, focusing his thoughts, and a flame ignited in his palm. He picked up a blade of grass from the ground and placed it into the fire. It immediately caught alight and was reduced to ashes. This was real fire, not some imitation of magical power. The moment the source of mana from fire magic had been replicated into Yuuki's soul, he had effectively mastered true fire magic. So this is the power of replication magic? Looking at the flames burning in his palm, memories of the special soul-viewing state flashed through his mind. He suddenly realized he still didn't fully understand the potential of his own replication magic. Ugh ugh ugh. Meath's muffled cries interrupted his thoughts. Yuuki smiled faintly and looked at him, raising a finger. The chain that had sealed Meath's mouth loosened. What exactly are you? How can you have that kind of magic? Meath's expression could no longer be described as fear. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. It seems consuming a grimoire doesn't harm the mage at all. Makes sense, my magic is replication, not absorption, Yuuki mused, observing Meath's still viable mental state. Then he smiled calmly at him, eyes cold as if staring at a corpse. Seeing this secret, Meath realized full well that he was doomed. So this is your magic. Ha ha ha. Magic like that shouldn't even exist, it's every mage's nightmare. Once someone discovers it, you're dead. Meath no longer begged, only cursing Yuuki with resentment etched across his face. Yuuki's smile didn't change. He raised his hand, forming a compact flame the size of a ping-pong ball in his palm. Fire magic, scorching flame. Whoosh! The ping-pong-sized flame shot from his palm toward Meath, bound in chains. The instant it touched him, it expanded into a massive fireball, engulfing Meath completely. Ah! Ah! Meath's screams echoed through the forest, fading quickly until they vanished. In less than half a minute, Meath's body had burned to ashes, scattering into the wind. Who says developing magic requires great talent? Yuuki tilted his head in mild surprise, staring at the empty space before him. The silver grimoire floating midair shimmered, and on the 5th page appeared a short line of magical script. Magic. Wind magic, Tower of the Storm spatial magic, spatial teleportation spatial magic, pocket dimension chain magic, magic binding iron chain formation fire magic, scorching flame. Yuuki stared at the grimoire in astonishment. Every grimoire page represents one magic, a fact all mages know. The first 4 pages followed this rule, 1 magic per page. But the 5th page represented not a single spell, but the fire magic attribute itself. This meant that any new spell he developed using fire magic would automatically belong on the 5th page. In other words, the 5th page had become a grimoire entirely dedicated to fire magic. Any magic developed using the attribute would be catalogued there. This is quite the haul today, Yuuki said, rubbing his cheek. Since mastering complete replication, he had constantly been astonished by the magic's potential. He realized that replicating spells was just an extension of replicating magical power itself. The enemy of all mages, huh? As long as I get strong enough before they discover it, I'll be fine. Yuuki glanced at where Meath's ashes had blown, whispering, then extended his hand through the void. Spatial magic, pocket dimension. A black spatial portal appeared in midair. Yuuki pushed his hand into it, channeling his mana. After expending more than half of his mana, a 1 cubic meter pocket dimension was fully formed and stabilized. He withdrew his hand, then removed the white robe of the 3 eyes and tossed it into the pocket dimension. The space shimmered and disappeared. This pocket dimension could expand with more mana input, a growth-oriented, late-stage magic. For now, it was a perfectly sized personal storage space. Since I'm here, I should check on the village. Yuuki glanced toward Haji village and whispered. Spatial teleportation. The black spatial portal appeared beneath him. He slowly sank into it and vanished from the forest. Chapter 49. What's it like when both the kingdom and the eye of the midnight sun are on your side? Inside the church of Hage village, the priest, Sister Lily, and all the children were gathered together, their faces full of anticipation as they looked at the 2 letters in the priest's hands. Really is incredible. joining the Magic Knights. He really is the pride of our village. The priest looked at the letters in his hands, his face lighting up with excitement. The other children in the church all looked on with admiration and joy. There's another letter from Asta. Sister Lily smiled as she opened Asta's letter. When will Asta return? When he does, we must give him a proper welcome, the priest said, his tone light. In his mind, there was no way Asta could have actually joined the Magic Knights. He said he passed. Sister Lily's face showed surprise. A brief silence fell as some of the children turned to her in astonishment. Outside the church, in a corner near the window, Yuuki leaned against the wall, listening to the sounds from inside. Seeing the children react to Asta's and Yuno's success in joining the Magic Knights brought a faint smile to his face. Looks like everyone's doing well, he murmured. Yuuki wasn't supposed to appear inside the church. He had only intended to observe, and unexpectedly caught the moment the letters arrived. So much has happened in the past couple of days, I even forgot to write letters, he said softly, shaking his head. From the Magic Knight's entrance test until now, only a little over 2 days had passed, yet so much had happened that it rivaled the experiences he had spent years accumulating in the village. My mana has mostly recovered. It's time to return to the capital. Yuuki glanced at the church, focused his thoughts, and a black spatial portal appeared before him. He stepped into it and vanished. Inside the church, the priest's face glowed with excitement. I never thought Yuno and Asta would both join the Magic Knights. He then asked eagerly, what about Yuki's letter? Sister Lily raised her empty hands. We haven't received one from Yuki yet. I see. Since Asta has joined, Yuki must have joined as well. Who would have thought our village would produce 3 major figures in the Magic Knights? After a momentary disappointment, the priest's excitement returned. Look, what's at the window? A small child in the church pointed with their innocent voice. Everyone turned to see a package resting on the windowsill. Sister Lily hurried over, opened the window, and retrieved the package, while the others crowded around, curious. What's this? Why is there a package? The priest touched his chin, murmuring softly, looks like it was delivered. Strange. I didn't notice it earlier. Perhaps I was too engrossed reading the letters. Sister Lily opened the package and found an envelope along with a small pouch of money. Ah! She gasped in surprise. It's Yuki's letter. What does it say? The priest asked eagerly. Yuki's letter read. I was unable to join the Magic Knights, but I unexpectedly received the recognition of a noble. I plan to remain in the capital for the time being to develop myself further. Sister Lily looked up in surprise as she told the priest. The priest's initial worry upon hearing Yuki hadn't joined vanished when he learned that Yuki had earned a noble's favor, his face lighting up with renewed excitement and joy. Wow, so much money, looks like 2,000 yul. Nash reached out and lifted the pouch. Its weight made him exclaim in astonishment. The priest, noticing the small movement, quickly snatched the money pouch from Nash's hands, his face beaming as he carefully tucked it into his robe. Children shouldn't be holding so much money. As expected, Yuki is the most thoughtful, helping out the family. Even though he didn't join the Magic Knights, earning the recognition of a noble, truly, Yuki never disappoints. The priest's face lit up as he waved his arms joyfully. Whether it's joining the Magic Knights or gaining the favor of a noble, this is news Hage Village has never seen before. Sister Lily covered her mouth, letting out a soft chuckle at the priest's animated display. Having received letters from all 3 of them, the priest and Sister Lily finally breathed a sigh of relief. Capital City. Bustling as ever. Yuki walked down the crowded streets, a thoughtful gleam in his eyes. The tasks Licht had entrusted to him were twofold: gather intelligence within the capital, and assist if the Eye of the Midnight Sun were active there. Neither task was complicated. The significance lay in the fact that, as the center of the Clover Kingdom, Licht had entrusted him with such important responsibilities. It was clear he was being taken seriously. For this reason, Raids looked even more displeased with him. Yuki shook his head lightly, even pursing his lips. Others might not understand, but he knew perfectly well. Licht's other identity was William, captain of the Golden Dawn. Any important events in the capital? How could they possibly be hidden from a Magic Knight captain who was also of the royal family? Collecting intelligence in the capital was, in reality, meaningless. Still, I have to put on appearances, can't disappoint Lord Licht. Yuki's lips curved slightly and he realized something amusing. Asta and Yuno were members of the Magic Knights. Yuuki, now a core member of the Eye of the Midnight Sun, could, in effect, monitor the actions of both the Clover Kingdom and the Eye, combined with his knowledge of events. To Yuuki, both sides were essentially open cards. He suddenly began to appreciate Lick's amusement, a sense of standing outside the chessboard, watching the pieces move. Yuuki recalled a line from a TV show he had once seen, "I've got someone above me." Now, he wasn't just covered from above, he had someone below him too. First, find out how many members of the Eye are operating in the capital. Also, I need a visible identity in the capital and a way to earn money. A gleam of twilight flashed in Yuki's eyes as he thought to himself, "Yuki?" At that moment, a pleasantly surprised voice rang out from a nearby street. Hearing the familiar voice, Yuki turned toward its source. "Rebecca?" He spoke in mild surprise as he saw the girl with reddish-brown hair approaching. Chapter 50, Farewell, Rebecca, Noelle struggling with mana control. Rebecca came up quickly, holding the groceries in both hands, her eyes glimmering with quiet delight. "Yuki, what are you doing here? I thought you'd already left the capital." Out of breath from running, she arrived in front of Yuki, panting lightly. "Ah, no, I just had some things to take care of," he replied with a gentle expression. "Oh, and last time I took a lot of lamp oil from your shop. I hope the money I left was enough." Yuki smiled softly. "The lamp oil isn't worth much. The money you left was more than enough." Rebecca shook her head gently, then asked with concern, "You didn't run into those people from last time, did you? Every year during the Magic Knight's entrance exam, there are always some troublemakers who target the examinees. Especially after the exam ends, sometimes examinees have their money stolen, and in some cases they even disappear." Her expression turned serious as she warned Yuki. Rebecca admired Yuki's gentle nature with children. Her younger siblings had been pestering her for more of his stories ever since hearing the last one. She couldn't help but feel a flicker of relief upon seeing him safe. Seeing him again on the street brought her a sudden surprise. Thinking carefully, they weren't exactly close. Approaching him first might have been a bit forward. Rebecca felt a little embarrassed at the thought. "No, I didn't run into them. Here, let me help you." Yuki shook his head calmly, then reached out to take the groceries from her hands. No, it's fine." Rebecca only realized after he took them. Yuki appeared completely unfazed. "Nothing to it. I'm a bit hungry anyway." Seeing Yuki carrying the groceries toward the small restaurant, Rebecca paused briefly, then quickly followed. Along the way, she walked slightly behind him, her head lowered, lost in thought. If one looked closely, her ears seemed slightly flushed. Yuki, meanwhile, had a calculating look in his eyes, considering his next plans. Once they returned to the restaurant, Rebecca nervously took the groceries from Yuki and hurried toward the kitchen. Yuki watched her retreating back for a moment, then found a table and sat down. He wasn't short on money. After all, having the backing of a major organization was comfortable. The Eye of the Midnight Sun wasn't a small group. As a core member, when Yuki left the base, Valtos had handed him 50,000 Yul for expenses. Add to that the 10,000 Yul he recovered from Meath, and subtract the 2,000 Yul he gave the church, and he currently had 58,000 Yul on hand. It wasn't that he didn't want to give more to the villagers, giving too much might worry them. The 2,000 Yul perfectly supported the story in his letter about gaining a noble's favor. After all, he had only been in the capital for a few days. This amount was enough for him to live comfortably in the capital for a month or two. Of course, in relative terms, Magic Knight members earned 200,000 Yul per month, so his 50,000 Yul was only a quarter of that. Don't underestimate the currency here. Magic Knight members represented the nation's top force. "Yuki Oniai-chan?" "Yes, it's Yuki Oniai-chan." Several excited voices called out as Rebecca's younger siblings all ran to him. "Yuki and I want to hear the story of Snow White again." "No, I want a new one." Yes, a new story." The children looked at him expectantly. "Stories can wait. Can someone bring me some paper and a pen?" Yuki raised his hand to quiet the children, then smiled and spoke to one of the older boys. "Wait a moment." The boy dashed upstairs and returned shortly with paper and a pen. "Thanks." Yuki nodded at the boy and began writing letters for Asta and Yuno. Knowing their personalities, they were probably worried about him. He intended to stay here temporarily, and if Asta or Yuno wanted to find him, the letters included the address. Outside the Black Bull's base in the forest. Boom! 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 Explosions sounded repeatedly. A silver-haired girl with twin ponytails, looking a little tsundere, was panting heavily in the forest. Around her, the ground was torn up with meter-wide craters, leaving the terrain in shambles. In front of her, a target was hung at the center of a large tree. She had clearly been trying to hit it but failed each time. Damn it! Frustration filled her face. Gritting her teeth, she raised her arms and aimed at the target again. Next moment, with a surge of mana, an oval-shaped water sphere appeared in front of her hands and shot toward the target tree. But, after only a few meters, it veered off course and hit another area. Boom! Another explosion echoed. She glared in disbelief, frustration turning to despair. Ah! Asta tumbled out from where the previous water sphere had landed. Hello there. Asta waved awkwardly at the stunned silver-haired girl. How are you here? Embarrassed by her repeated failures, her face flushed instantly. You missed because you can't control your mana precisely, right? Asta asked curiously, not noticing her embarrassment, scratching his head. Mind your own business, you pest. Her face turned even redder, and she spoke with visible agitation. Asta seemed used to her scolding. I didn't mean it that way. I just thought, since you're trying so hard but still can't control it, you might ask someone for guidance. His voice brightened suddenly. I have a friend, Yuuki, who's really skilled at mana control. I can introduce him. Even Yuno said that in terms of mana control, no one beats Yuuki. Yuuki? Yuno? The silver-haired girl paused. She didn't know Yuuki, but Yuno, he was the owner of the 5-leaf clover grimoire. Her eyes lit up slightly.